Test mic 3. Testing mic 6 or 3 or Dana.
Good afternoon. The time is 4:01. The Wayzata Public School Board of Education work session for January 22nd, 2024 will now come to order. Let's go around the table and for a roll call introductions, we'll start with my right with Heidi.
Heidi Cater. Stacy Bob. Sarah Johansson.
Dan Ginestra.
Dana Miller.
Faraz Bhinde.
Dee Dee Caring.
Sheila Pryor.
Nathan Flansburgh.
Chase Anderson.
And I am Milind Sohoni. Thank you very much, everyone, and welcome.
Valentina Years.
Oh,
Sorry,
did you miss that? I'm sorry.
she was on here.
Did you miss her name or?
Yeah, she did. She didn't get a chance. She was
Okay.
out of the room and
Okay. All right. First, we have Wayzata Indigenous Advisory Committee vote of concurrence. Director of Equity and Inclusion, Solveig Halliday, with Becky Kittleson will present this. And we also are joined by the WIAC Chairperson, Amanda Kramer. Solveig.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Solveig Halliday. I'm our Director of Equity and Inclusion. You heard about a few of us that are going to be speaking and sharing about a vote of concurrence that recently took place with our Wayzata Indigenous Advisory Committee. This is something that is an annual part of the umbrella of American Indian Education Aid that allows us to expand opportunities and services and learning related to our Indigenous community and students. And overseeing a lot of that work is Becky Kittleson, our inclusion coordinator. And so with us tonight, we also have our WIAC chairperson, Amanda Kramer, and her daughter, Colette, who is one of our high school students who has been critical in how we've been able to move some programming and things forward in the last couple of years. I'm going to pause. Becky, did you want to add anything?
yes. So today we're here to share the vote of concurrence, and that although there were the community in the family members of our Indigenous students did have a vote of concurrence, there are still ways in which we are seeking to be better. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to our high school student, Colette. No, that's okay. Do you want to share some of the things, the feedback that came up from the meeting? Yes.
Okay. Sorry. So from the last WIAC meeting that we had, we talked a little bit about just the program at the school and how we, how attendance is going and like getting people into our meetings, because our meetings, I feel, are very helpful, and it's also not just a place of like education, but it's also a space of support for our Indigenous students, and growing that community I feel is really important. So that's why I'm kind of on it about attendance. And it sometimes is hard to come to a meeting during school or after school hours. So that's why I'm really pushing to get us during school hours. And I use our time because that is kind of a time where you can work on things you need to get done. The only complaint I have about that is it's 25 to 30 minutes. I don't know, one of the two. And so sometimes it's hard just to really, because you come in, you settle down, and then you have to go right away. And sometimes it's hard just to build a community in 5 minutes.
So there's just one example of something that, how do we use our structures to make sure that we really are providing the time and space for students to have that connection, to have that growth. And so that's one of the things that's, I think, a really helpful part of having this annual vote of concurrence, is that it creates that intentional time for us to hear directly what's going well, what do we need to improve on, what shifts do we need to make. And that is just one example, and ongoing, work to keep improving all of this. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Amanda?
I know definitely the one thing we've been looking at, especially this year, is just making sure there's a way to remove barriers from students from being able to attend, whether, looking at the facing of after-school programs where there's sometimes transportation issues, needing to have different ways of family situations where they might not be able to attend after school versus being able to have that ability to be in school, just to make sure that it is something that is part of their regular curriculum. At the same point, a lot of conversation with everything that the school is doing well too, of being able to further with funds for educators to be able to get out there and experience different ways of education, looking at different reading materials as well as educational tools for teachers. So not just affecting the Indigenous students, but all students as well too.
So with that, like you said, we have our vote of concurrence and a list of things to keep growing and working on. And I don't know if you have any questions for us.
Well, thank you, Solveig. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Becky, and thank you, Ms. Kramer. My board colleagues, if anybody has any comments or questions, please do so. Heidi?
As you're thinking about removing barriers and moving the work forward, what are the pathways for you to address some of these issues?
A primary piece is bringing the feedback from our students and families back to the administrative team and working collaboratively with them at the high school. Last year, we did have multiple hour time offerings, and this year we went to partial hour time, partial after school. And as we're learning, that is an added, barrier for some students getting to the after school. There was some, because the hour time itself is a constraint. It isn't an exceptionally long period. So that's something that we're going to have to investigate. What are some creative ways that we can work within the schedule to find some during the day, longer periods? Because that is part of also the updated legislation regarding our WEAC offerings for students.
Okay, I have one more follow-up question. You mentioned the high school. Is that the only place that this work is happening right now?
No, we have had a few community gatherings, but that is an area that we definitely want to expand. We're also looking at some additional offerings at our middle school, and we actually have some folks who we contract with who are able to provide these learning and community building experiences for our students. And we are looking at what might an elementary option be as well. Additional challenges there being, right, the spread out, not in one building component, but we have those conversations started, and I know some very interested families in those opportunities. So we're going to keep working on figuring out how to expand more opportunities beyond the more robust offerings right now at the high school level.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. I am wondering about how we collaborate with other districts that also have WEACs, and so like super exciting 287 is just starting up theirs, right, which could then reach some WayZata students. In what ways do you collaborate with our neighbors and our partners?
That was one of, there was a partnership that was pretty well established before I stepped into this role and I should say it was on our calendar. I don't know that a lot of our families got actually to those events is one of the things that I had learned about. And so that is one of the next steps that we definitely want to be looking into. I know that we've had conversations, for example, about a powwow as something that other similar groups in other districts do create. Well, is that something that we could partner on? So we are looking at what those partnerships might be, but we haven't fully established them yet.
No, I was just talking about Orono. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from board colleagues? I have three simple questions. One is, how long has the MDE required school districts to have this advisory committee in place and have this annually renewed? Approximate idea?
I actually don't know the historical timeline on that.
I want to say at least for 5 or 6 years. We've been in other districts, so
Yeah.
have participated in.
And about how many Indigenous students do we have in our school district? Do you have any idea of that?
About, we have almost 50, so in
How many?
almost 50.
50. Okay, thank you. And Amanda, a question for you. You are required by the MDE to sit in these meetings. And so what exactly is your role? What do you communicate with them about?
The requirement of the meetings is primarily around we receive funding and what is input from the families in our community around how we're using that funding and various opportunities. So some additional things that have come through that are like funding a day-long trip to the Native College Fair that occurred in October, opportunities to provide some reimbursement, scholarship-type support in order to do additional college visits, to attend the Minnesota Indigenous Education Conference that happens in the spring. So it's those types of things that are the priority things that are part of conversation, and then anything that the community is wanting to bring up. So one thing that did just recently come up that's also in that area for improvement is, what is it that we're doing to truly honor and celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day in the fall? So those are some of the things that it creates that space for that, and those are the conversations that are had.
Thank you. So board colleagues, this is not a vote per se. It says here Wayzata Indigenous Advisory Committee vote of concurrence. Basically, it has already been voted for. We are just basically affirming that has been done. So if there are no more questions, thank you, ladies, and appreciate your coming here, and we will see you again next year.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda are the finance and operation reports. Executive Director D.D. Caring will provide a general budget planning update. Over to you, D.D. and Scott.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Anderson. Thanks for this opportunity to speak with you tonight. As is typical, we're starting to kick off our budget process, and so we want to run through a few of the just preliminary assumptions, timeline, and then talk a little bit about enrollment. I know that's always an important part of what the board wants to hear about. So we will go through, and it just moved on. Trying to look at that and move mine along, so thank you. So the timeline for 24-25 school year is what we're talking about now. We'll talk about the enrollment and the budget assumptions, as I mentioned earlier. I got to have one of you help me.
I'll do this.
Okay, thanks. So the budget timeline actually starts a little bit in November, December with Scott and his team making sure to start working on updating the current year budget after the audit is finished. And so there's like a succession here. As I've mentioned to the school board before, we're always kind of working in 3 years at a time, right? So we're finishing up the audit, we're in the new year, and then we've got a next year coming up. So January 24th, we're bringing to the school board our initial budget assumptions. In February, Scott and I will bring forward the 23-24 current school year budget revisions. And that is a typical thing that school districts do. They look at where we're at, given our enrollment, given any changes that we know for any of the other previous assumptions. For instance, we might have an update on what the current rate is for utilities. So we might update that as an example. So we always try to stay current with that. We sometimes second revision, and that might be right before we do the final budget. And that provides the board with a better, well, it's finance team too, but a better idea of what we think next year will happen, okay? Then in March, we'll bring forward what is called the capital-related budget. That'll be the operating capital, the long-term facility maintenance, and I believe we bring the tech levy information. Those where we're spending capital dollars, but in different buckets. And then in April and May, we'll bring forward some budget updates just along the line to tell you kind of where we're at, some things we're seeing, any more information that we have. So we may or may not have any additional, but we might just give you a quick little update. And then required by the MDE and Minnesota State statute, we must have a board-approved budget by the end of June. And so we'll have that no later than June 30th for the next fiscal year. So next we start with the enrollment projections, and Kristen and her staff, along with conversations with Scott and we've been looking at our enrollment projections, and they are based on the enrollment study that was done by Hazel Reinhardt last year, and we got that in December of 22. And so we look at that, we look at current trends, we look at what are we seeing for new housing developments. We look at previous information related to the succession of kids moving through and kids moving in and out of our district. So all of that has been done under what Kristen does and using the tools that we have available. So as you can see here, we've got projection for 24, 25, and then 25, 26, all the way through 27, 28. I always caution school board members that even a year out is a difficult projection to make with the information we have. We do the best we can, but October 1 enrollment changes. That's our mark when we have to submit the first pass at what our enrollment looks like to the state of Minnesota. So you can see the K-5 in 24-25 projected to go up from 57 to 50, just under 6,000 students by 27-28. Middle school, currently just under 3,000 students projected for next year, going up to 3,277. And then in the high school level, 3,831 for next year and going up to 4,055. And then the total amount, 12,683. Going up to 13,299. All right, we'll get into a little bit that. I know it's a little small. And then next, just want to talk a little bit about where we're at with kind of the capacity of our schools, and we're looking at the elementary in particular. So the schools listed on the left-hand side, the capacity that was done previously in a previous study through Wold Architects, listing what our capacity is based on the number of classrooms and what the number of students per classroom that could typically fit in there. So it has not been adjusted upward for the changes that we made to enrollment class sizes for this next year. So looking at 22-23, the purpose of looking at the 3 different years is to see where we have some pressure points. So what the enrollment is on October 1 versus what the capacity is that was in that white column gives us how much room do we have in there. And you can see as we get out to 23-24, we have some pressure point currently we're experiencing at Sunset Hill. And then as we get out to the next year in 24-25, we can see that we have Northwoods will be over capacity, and Sunset Hill, will be as well. But then we have others following along, Greenwood, Oakwood, and then Plymouth Creek. Now, again, the thing I want you to remind you of is that the capacity within our buildings is a little low compared to when you look at it with the changes in the increase in class size. So again, we look at this and monitor this along with the SLT. We look at all of that and how we can help to make improvements to those figures. Then next, if we look at, sorry, there's a U in there. I don't know how that got in there on mine. So the secondary enrollment projection based on our recent migration, so you can see Central at 1381. I think that's down a little bit from where we were the last couple of years. East at 784 and West at 830. And then at the high school, 3,830 for a total at the secondary of 6,826. So when we look at enrollment for the current year and future years, This shows the growth in elementary. It shows the growth in the middle schools up to 25, 26, as well as a little bit into the high school. Certainly in 24, 25, we're going to see some increase, but then it plateaus a little bit into 25, 26. Next, we're going to jump into budget assumptions looking at the revenue. So when we do the revenue and the expenses, which will come up next, we will look at what do we expect those percent increases to be. So the first line, the state aid, in the current year, we know that we got an increase of 4%. When we look at the next year, it'll only be 2%, and the following year, 2%. I shouldn't say only. That is the assumption we're using because there is a floor and a ceiling of that net inflation factor. So the most it can go up is 3%, the lowest is 2%. We typically try to be more conservative and go with the lower percent and not project a higher percent that we might not get. Then with the levy, the 2.63 in the current year, 4.87% increase, and then we're estimating for 25, 26, a 3%. So actual increases in 23 and 24 and 25 is an estimate. All other, that is things like gate receipts, athletic fees, those types of things, other miscellaneous income, we just leave that at about a 2% increase. Federal, year to year, we've just left that at a 0% increase. With federal funding, we know that what revenue comes in, or the expenses use all that. We have to spend it in that category. So then next, this is a little busier slide for you to look at, but we do look at all these categories. So salaries, our health insurance, our TRA, which is Teacher Retirement Association rate, PERA rate, which is the Public Employees Association rate. Both of those are pension-related type of funding, and then expenses and funding. So then supplies, and then fuel, utilities, and transportation. So on salaries, we know that some contracts are settled. For instance, our teacher's contract is settled, but coming up this year in the spring, we'll be in negotiations with some of those other categories of employee groups. So we always talk about, we go by what is in the contract, or for upcoming ones, whatever the board provides us with parameters for the upcoming school year. And then health insurance, we know that the premiums are going up 7% in the current year, and we're estimating 5% for the next 2. You can see what the rates are for TRA and PERA. They stay the same. And then supplies, 3 to 4% this year, and we're suggesting about an inflation of about 3% going forward. And then fuel and utilities, 6% this year, 6 to 8% the next year, and then 5%. And then finally, for transportation, you can see 15%, 7% in the second year, and then in 25, 26, 7 to 10%. Believe those are all of our assumptions that we wanted to bring forward. Once, now that we've reviewed those with you, we will be working on developing a budget projection for next year based on the enrollment, the revenue percents increase, the expense increases that we anticipate. And then we'll work together with the SLT, we'll work with the HR department on staffing, and roll that forward to develop the budget. Likewise, we work with Michelle in the food service department and Jenny in community education to develop those budgets as well. So, and I do have Kristen Tollison, who does all of our enrollment and our enrollment projections, and has her pulse on new developments that have been going on in our communities. And then Scott, of course, has more information as it relates to any of the assumptions. And so with that, we welcome any questions that you might have. Ours.
2 questions. So if you go on the budget revenue assumptions, so the different percentages that were shown in different category, right? So the one slide back, revenue assumptions. Yeah.
Yep.
So overall it's 8%, but the every category dollars will change, right? So state aid, 4%, this year versus 2% next year. So overall, when we look at our budget assumptions, are we staying where we were last year? Are we going down? Are we going up? What's the general trend?
As far as what we're receiving for revenue. So mostly the state aid is made up of a per pupil allocation. So we get the allocation increase is dictated by the state of Minnesota. So we take that revenue and that increase times the number of students to get to our state aid. And then there are other categorical state aids that are included in that as well.
Okay.
Special education, there's some professional development, there's other funds that we receive as well.
Sure.
So I'm not sure I understood
Yeah,
your question.
no, I think partially. So if we look at 24-25, right? So the state aid drops from 4% to 2%, but the levy goes up from 2.63 to 4.87.
Yeah.
Will that compensate each other or no?
No.
No. Okay,
No.
that's what I thought.
State aid makes up about 70%, 65 to 65%, and the levy portion is a smaller portion.
Smaller portion.
Of that. So
And the levy can be deceiving as well because that has our long-term facility maintenance in there, which, as we've talked about in prior meetings, that can vary from year to year, and it's just on the timing of projects and when things get done. So that kind of ebbs and flows, and what we don't spend goes back, and then we go out with a 10-year plan. So that's it. Not really correlated. But
Right.
That's a great question.
Okay, makes sense. And on the expense side, you talked about 3% inflation being baked into the equation, right? But the transportation, is there any reason why it's 15% and drops to 7 and then stays between 7 and 10?
yeah, great question. So we went into contract negotiations a couple of years ago with and we do get agreements with them for multiple years. And this is reflective of that. So it did go up, and you'll recall in 21, 22, and even previous, there was a lot of issues with transportation throughout the metro area, right? And our bus company, we have two, MTI and First Student, thank you. Both of them were needing to increase their wages for their bus drivers to attract them and to retain them. So that's part of it. Fuel costs are embedded in that as well for transportation. So we knew we'd have that higher expense, and then we also knew that it was going to come down. 25, 26, I think, is a new year of the contract, and so we're estimating for that.
Yeah.
It's far enough out there that we'll have time to refine that.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Chase.
I just wanted to make one comment on this, and I apologize if one of the three of you referenced this, but for the TRA and the PERA, those percentages are the percent, they're not increases,
Correct. Yeah.
but the other ones are. So those are projected increases.
So that's why we worded as rate, and
Yeah.
maybe that should have been explained better by me. So 8.7% is the rate the school district contributes for an employee that is covered under TRA, and the 7.5 is the district's rate for employees that are under PERA. Every so often, they increase that rate. So then we usually try to bring that forward. So in the past, the 8.7 for TRA might have been at 8.25 or 8.5, and so we're showing what those rates are. Scott just brought it up, 2018, yeah, it just changed this year. So it's the employer contribution started out in 2018 at 7.71, and you can see now is 8.75. So we always bring that forward because it is a cost to the district, but thank you, Chase, for bringing that up.
Yep. Yeah, I just mentioned it as, certainly one of the assumptions and things that we have to build into the budget. The other point I just wanted to make is the other ones that are not those TRA and PERA, you can see the anticipated increases when compared to a 2% increase on the funding formula. I just wanted to make that point that it helps even at 4%. I mean, if you compare them to those increases, it kind of helps reinforce and emphasize the challenges with budgets when looking at the increases in revenue versus the anticipated increases in expenditures. So thanks for sharing that information with us.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yes. Anybody else? So I just want to clarify here once again that for the new board members especially, that June 30th is our deadline for the budget approval. So until then, we will keep seeing this once every so often, right? In a work
Yeah,
session.
we'll actually come forward with kind of a full financial picture. What do we think our revenue is going to be? What is our expenses? And what do we think we'll see for a bottom line, which then directly affects the fund balances? We'll do something similar for food service and community education as well. Those are the other two bigger funds, as well as our debt service. We'll have that as well. So in the end, if you look at the finance webpage, you can see what the budget has been and the documents that go along with that to get a better understanding of what you, as a school board member, you'll be looking at when it comes to June. Yep.
Another comment I wanted to make was MTI is something that's reimbursed completely from the state. The MTI.
Well, special education
Right.
is reimbursed at 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Sheila. Go ahead.
I had a question about enrollment. I was hoping you could maybe shed a little bit of light on, where we're at. I mean, it looks like we're are we back on track from where we were pre-pandemic? And if you wanted to say anything else about that.
Certainly. Thank you for the question. The modeling that we used, this year's October 1 counts exceeded Hazel Reinhardt's 4 models. So there's 4 different models that the demographer prepares for us, combinations of migration and birth rates. And we exceeded by over 100 students the high model. So we forecast in the upcoming years based on that. We exceeded that. So even the high model is a little bit of a conservative side of the enrollment.
And when she says high, she means high kindergarten and high migration. Okay. And previously we looked at low kindergarten, high migration, if I've got that right. So there's 4 different models that Hazel Reinhardt brings forward. And if you haven't had a chance, if you're a new board member, you might want to read over that document. It is on the finance webpage, and it provides an overview of how she conducts her study and provides that forward. And Kristen then took that information and brought it forward based on what we actually experienced in the October one.
And we needed to accommodate for the boundary changes. So we have since moved Northwood's growth to Oakwood, Greenwood growth to Gleason Lake, and we've realigned Kimberly Lane to east and Oakwood to west. So taking Hazel's overall thoughts and then adjusting not adjusting the final number, but adjusting the path to the final number to reflect our new boundaries.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the board colleagues here? If not, thank you, Dee Dee, thank you, Scott, and thank you, Kristen.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make note of and offer thank yous to Kristen Tollison, who's here tonight, giving us the presentation and helping with this. And to the best guess I might have is this may be her final school board meeting presenting, but we appreciate over the years, your nearly 30 years of work with the school district and the updates on budget and enrollment projections and working with consultants and all of the various duties that you were involved in. I just wanted to take an opportunity on behalf of the district to thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your information here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next item on the agenda, number 4A, is the teaching and learning reports. First, it'll be Executive Director Dana Miller, along with her colleagues Austin Tollerson, Julie Schneider, and is Anne Ferenbach. Yeah, she's here. Okay. Julie is not there then, right?
I'm right here.
Oh, Julie is there. Okay, and Dana is on the other side. You call
right
first.
here.
Thank you. We'll first provide an update on the latest on the READ Act. So please take it over, Dana. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Anderson. We are here tonight to provide an update. We've been coming almost monthly now, I think, to give you an update on the READ Act as it's moving that fast. And as our director mentioned, we have Austin Tollerson here tonight, Director of Teaching and Learning, and then Julie Schneider and Ann Fehrenbach, our instructional coordinators, specifically in literacy and reading. And so we have a lot of expertise at this table tonight to provide an update for you. Do I have a clicker?
I think that's you too. Fascinating. Fantastic.
No, it's really hard.
Okay.
Oh.
All right.
And so we've started every READ Act presentation with this statement, and that is that Wayzata is committed to robust job-embedded professional learning and evidence-based instruction with quality materials. And I am going to read this out loud so that it's right here with us at our forethought as we continue to speak tonight on the READ Act. We are well positioned to satisfy the requirements of the READ Act and to ensure high levels of literacy for each and every Wayzata student. So long before the READ Act last year went into legislation, this was the work that Wayzata was committed to and continues to be committed to. And because of that, we're very well positioned as the legislation continues to move forward and MDE and those involved attempt to provide some clarity to the state on this work. So we're going to break down some of the components of the READ Act. We'll go briefly into some of those pieces. We've been here before, and then go more in depth into the professional learning requirement, as well as an update on the curriculum requirement. So as far as leadership is concerned, Teaching and Learning continues to monitor this work in legislation daily, hourly. We joke that that's our what we live and breathe here. We're connected to literacy leaders across the state through our professional learning organizations, especially Julie and Ann, who stay very closely tied and are considered leaders in this field, and so most often have others reaching out to them, wondering where this is going. And because also of their strong connections, we're strongly connected to many of the publishers, both in the professional learning training that we're working as well as our curriculum. So those connections really help in getting us information and at the forefront of this work where others may not have quite some of those links. So I always really appreciate the members of the Teaching and Learning team. We have been attending everything and anything that MDE, CARI, MACL, which is the Metro Area Curriculum Leaders, as well as publishers and additional teams provide. At least several of us attend those. We video them, we go back over them, and are regularly referring back to that work. Literally, the information from the READ Act changes almost daily, and so we're doing our best to stay abreast of that. And then we are also working to make sure all of our teams are up to breast and where they're learning as well. So the TNL directors, whether it's Austin or Stacy Lackner and Abby Brar, we get together so that we also all know, regardless of where we're at, we can speak to this work. Our instructional coordinators, two of them are here tonight, but our entire team also is assisting in this work because of the heavy lift it is. And then those additional literacy coaches are really providing those bridges in the building. And with 3 elementary principals here tonight, for another reason, I encourage you to ask them a question about how that's going in their building as well. And then our peer coaches closely linked to the work as well. So we really have a full team that is monitoring and as well as linking the work back to our teachers and our leaders in our building.
Okay, so this slide is all about just our commitment. You'll notice across all the top of the slides is our commitment to the READ Act, and the READ Act is multifaceted. So now we're just going to think about professional learning. Those requirements came out in August, or at least the 3 programs did, and then we've learned more along the way. So we are still excited to support that common knowledge building for all K-5 teachers. The teaching and learning team, including Austin, our Corey Knudsen, our union president, some others will be going through that training as soon as it's available, just so that we can really have a full understanding and support our teachers as they go through it. So we're really excited about that. And the more we learn about CORE, the more we are committed to this professional learning. That piece is really the glue that holds everything else together. You'll see as the requirements come out, they're around assessment, curriculum, but professional learning is kind of where the magic happens and teachers learn about how to support students. So we are continuing. I have one more group of Orton Gillingham teachers that are training that I'm doing in February, and that will complete all kindergarten teachers training. I think I have 5 more kindergarten teachers, special education teachers, and I had a kindergarten teacher pull me aside today at
3:15 when we were out of another READ Act meeting, and just tell me how grateful that she is that no matter if the state had approved it or not at this point, and that's at this point, that they're doing things, their team in their classrooms every day. And so they're just really excited about that work. For now, we'll pause and focus on the READ Act and then think about how those two things partner, because I think teachers are going to be really thrilled with the way those two things partner together and support them in better serving their students.
I think that speaks really, again, back to that first slide of Wayzata being well-positioned, is that we will do the mandated training in core, which is, as Julie said, is very high-quality training, really tightly connected to CCC. But on top of that, we've committed to that Orton Gillingham training that our kindergarten teachers will already have, so that layering of training, and then once we get everybody through that core, we'll revisit that for at least our first grade teachers as well.
Yep. We have lots of teachers asking that are not in the current group that are asking, what about us? When can we get trained? So we're excited about core for now, but this learning never stops. So got the clicker. There we go.
Right. In addition to, as Julie alluded to, our core professional learning plan, and we alluded to this when we were here for the calendar, I believe in December, but to give you some more specific details on that, CORE is telling us they will be available on early March, and so then we have to register for that through the state. At that time then, as soon as it's ready, as Julie alluded, teaching and learning, pretty much all of our team, along with our literacy coaches, specialized service, Corey and as our WA leadership, will begin training first. And one of the advantages of that is we want to have lived it and gone through it before we ask our teachers to do that. And that way we'll be able to anticipate if there are any road bumps that we weren't expecting, we'll be able to respond to those. And additionally, we'll be able to help guide our teachers through that training with a little bit of preview or what we're referring to as study guides. So it's always helpful. It's good learning practice when we work with students to say, this is what you should be listening for. This is what you should be watching. That's a learning strategy. And so we will engage in that with our teachers as well. That phase 1 timeline then will begin on March 24th and end in November 8th. And so as you look at those dates below, what we have worked with HR and the union, so much thanks to Stacy Voss and Corey Knutson for their collaboration in this, is to build a school calendar where these hours can be built in. And therefore, while we acknowledge this is an added addition of stress for our teachers, and I want to clarify on that, be really clear, this is one more thing. So we've done our best to try and etch out the hours for this. So this will be our professional learning plan for the remainder really of this school year in March. We just have a couple little trainings we need to do on those 2 days for some of our buildings. And then this will be the workshop PD as well as that September and November PD. So our teachers then can determine their schedule. So we really wanted to create a schedule that was flexible and learner responsive. Again, just like we want to be learner responsive in the classroom, we want to provide that same opportunity for our teachers to embrace their learning. So there's approximately 44 to 48 hours of PD time, depending on that June 7th time on how teachers want to approach that. And those are the hours that we're giving them to do the training. However, if they would choose to do that on their own at different spots, that's fine. Then they will have that as a flexible training. So for example, I might want to, because this would be me, I might decide, okay, I'll do this March 29th and 8th and June 7th, but then I'm going to complete the rest of it this summer because I kind of want it off my mind, and I want to like really be able to do that in the comforts of my backyard this summer. Then those dates in September, November, and August would be my time to work from home and do what I need to do, or my flexible time. I might be somebody, Austin might decide in doing his that he really wants to follow the schedule just as laid for, so he would do it on those specific dates, and teachers will have that ability. In addition, WAA has agreed to that the core training can also be used as an A class, which for our new board members is the Academy of Wayzata Educators, and it's part of our QComp plan. All teachers can take a course for 12 hours and be paid for that. And generally, it needs to be teacher-led, teacher-created, teacher choice. Again, it's a teacher choice this year, but it is training not created by teachers, and so WA is opened that door for teachers. And so in addition to the 4 to 48 hours that we're providing, that's an additional 12 hours that teachers could use for that training. Teachers do receive 45 continuing education units, CEU credits, for use towards their licensure for this training. So that is what CORE is saying is about the average time to complete this training, and we believe we've built that into their time.
All right, from professional learning to curriculum, the next few slides we're going to talk a little bit about the selection process that MDE and CARI collaborated on to approve curricula for schools in the state of Minnesota through the READ Act. And when we talk about approved curricula, it's approved for reimbursement. And so what that means is if you're going to use state funding for curriculum, then you would have to choose one of the curriculum approved by MDE and the collaboration of CARI in order to use that funding. It's not mandating what curriculum you use. It's specifically talking about the use of any potential funding. Excuse me. Part of that process, so MDE and CARI collaborated on this process. It was a two-part process, and we wanted to lay out just some of the criteria they used and how that might relate to our curriculum choices and specifically our support of and how we move forward in evaluating our use of collaborative classroom and our elementary curriculum. So the two-part process outlined that any curriculum that was moving forward in the process had to meet certain criteria, that being an evidence-based curriculum, that it didn't use 3 queuing system, and you can see some of the non-negotiables there. CCC did make it through that into that second review stage, and so we wanted to note particularly that that would indicate that CCC did meet those minimal criteria. So in summary, we feel confident in moving forward in CCC that it does meet some of those non-negotiables and does not use 3 queuing and is evidence-based in some of those criteria that were used to evaluate the curriculum.
Kind of going to reiterate that then so that we're really clear, and we'll do it again at the talking points, but that the state is not mandating any curriculum. They're mandating training, but not curriculum. They're recommending curriculum if you desire to use state READ Act dollars, and we're going to talk about that where we are in our curriculum review. We purchased CCC about 5-6 years ago, and that would not be eligible for reimbursement. And so CCC again did meet. They looked at about 40 curriculums and they narrowed it down to 24. And in order to be considered, you had to pass that first stage, which meant that CCC is evidence-based and it does not use the 3 queuing systems. And then again, it's systematic and explicit. It's culturally and linguistically responsive. It supports multilingual learners and students receiving special education services. It supports structured literacy, and its materials are systematically build knowledge. So again, very much around the evidence-based or science-based SOR of reading that we've heard about. CCC did make that first clearance, and then we're going to go into a little bit more detail on where the questions were.
So yeah, I'll provide a little bit more information about the curriculum that MDE is recommending for reimbursement. You can see here on the slide that there are sort of 3 categories of curricula, the first being comprehensive curricula. And what they mean by that is curriculum that addresses both foundational skills and the knowledge building components. MDE has recognized one curricula that meets their criteria for that called EL Education Open Up. You can see listed there. The second category of curricula that they have reviewed and recommended is foundational curricula. So those would be programs that would address phonological awareness, phonics, decoding, encoding, and fluency. And you can see here that there are 3 programs recommended there: magnetic reading, UFly, and University of Minnesota's functional phonics. Just a note that the UFly piece, we are already using components of UFly in our Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. Julie's going to highlight a little bit of some of the work we've done in just a little bit that you'll see how we're doing some of that. The foundational curricula need to be paired with a knowledge building curricula. And that when you say knowledge building, what they're referring to is vocabulary, comprehension, and writing. So they've identified wit and wisdom as the one knowledge building curriculum that meets their criteria. So again, you'd have to pair wit and wisdom with one of the other 3 to have a comprehensive program. Wit and wisdom does have a foundational skills program, but that did not meet their criteria. GEODS is not on their list. And then just to note, there are 9 other foundational skills programs that are eligible for reconsideration I don't have them all committed to memory, but there are a few: 95 Phonics, Wilson Foundations, and 7 others. And then here, like Austin said, Collaborative Classroom, Center for Collaborative Classroom, Collaborative Literacy is eligible for reconsideration. You'll note here, Dana alluded to the fact that our last review for reading curriculum began in 2017. I think I've been here before talking with you all about that. And we adopted this curriculum in 2019. So we're 5 years in. One of the things to note is that we do have an older copyright version of this material. And like with any curriculum, we are constantly looking at our data, listening to our teachers, seeing about, what do we need to enhance, what do we need to adjust, what are some of the training our teachers need to implement these programs. So I think in terms of where we're at with curriculum review right now, it would make sense that during our next round, or that we would look at this version of collaborative literacy. Just as part of a regular review process, we would always check the updated version of what we have. So that's where we're at with curriculum for the most part.
And to add a little bit more to that second edition, first edition, which is very common, we have the copies of the second edition, and it's common for you to look at what is different, what changes have they made. And because we have such a close collaboration with CCC, we've been able to speak to them, Ann and Julie have been able to talk to them about some of those places where it maybe needs a boost or enhance, or because it was a first edition was missing stuff. And we get great feedback from our teachers and our principals in that area too. So we're going to talk a lot about what curriculum does and what teaching does. And this is a place where, regardless of your curriculum, it requires teachers using the curriculum and always supplementing. There's no one perfect curriculum. So again, that second edition CCC, we actually did look at that for 4th and 5th grade. I think it was that where we were looking. Yeah, 4th and 5th grade last spring. But again, want to wait in investing any funds until we see where the state is at in this REDACT process.
And I should quickly add, Ann and I last met with the core rep and the CCC rep on Friday, and we got some clarity around that it is the second edition that's approved, but it's not that the first was not approved. They didn't submit the first. I think that's important because just the narrative that, they didn't approve our edition. They submitted the most recent because that was what was required by the guidelines that MDE provided. So the copyright is 2015. And so that was older than the copyrights they were accepting. So it's not that got denied, it's that it was never submitted in the first place.
And to add one more layer to that, in talking with the rep and looking at the materials, in K2, it's mostly a repackaging of the materials. They come with lots of manuals and things like that that teachers have to figure out, where do I get this? Where do I get that? They've repackaged it to be much more user-friendly. There aren't lots of changes to the content in K2. In 3.5, they have updated the work for word work, especially around decoding, more advanced decoding skills, multisyllabic words, and morphemes, word knowledge, things like that have been improved in the newer materials.
So we wanted to share this. You might have heard Dana say there's no one perfect curriculum. We wanted to share this rubric, and we're not going to go through it in a lot of detail, but this is what Carey and MDE shared from their findings when they evaluated the curricula. You'll see there by the arrow, there's a collaborative classroom. You see a lot of green dots in the things they found, some areas I think we might have identified as well, as Ann spoken, especially at 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, areas that we might have already be supplementing or using other materials to help support our teachers in that work. But all that to say that you can see even in some of the approved curricula that are on here, there's areas that you need to make decisions as a district on what you might need to supplement and help to support your teachers on. So we remain, again, confident in CCC and some of the things that we're doing and the work we're doing. And as we look forward in our national review process and whether we adopt the second edition of CCC going forward or not, we remain confident in what we're doing. What's that? Oh. just, I think Dana wanted to pull out we do have the only globally green dot on the list there being collaborative classroom. You'll see the little black line through that, and that has to do with some of the red flags and the phonemic awareness and the phonemes and morphemes. But again, areas that we ourselves identified, and Julie's going to talk more about some of the materials that we have that we're using to help support teachers in some of those areas.
You also notice on that bar, the very top one is the EL education up, and that was the one curriculum they approved, but you'll notice that it was only a partially meets in the overall. So the highest meets in the overall actually was our CCC or collaborative curriculum, but the way they did their rubric is if a curriculum had a red flag, then that needs to be addressed before it can get the full green. So a curriculum could have partially meets and some green across there, but no red, and therefore gets approved, but doesn't necessarily have one that meets all categories. And again, as you will look through that, those are all strong curriculums, and all of them have areas that maybe didn't meet on the rubric, because again, no one curriculum meets everybody's needs.
So look at all of those publishers received feedback on the rubric, I believe last week, on the areas that why they might have met as an improved curriculum. So they are looking at those now. They will have until from between January 24th and February 29th to submit for reconsideration to MDE. And then MDE will have about 60 days after that to decide if they're approving them or putting them on the approved list for reimbursement. Again, a list for reimbursement, not a mandated list of curriculum. So regardless of those outcomes, we'll be evaluating to make sure that we're using a curriculum that meets the needs of our students, is evidence-based, and meets the values of structured literacy and supports our students' literacy going forward.
Okay, so we have thought about our commitment to our students through professional learning, through curriculum, and we also just want to take a little time and think about what it means for evidence-based practices, because CORE is going to support that. We're excited to think about all the possibilities within CORE, modules that teachers go through that have videos, practical applications, readings, opportunities to collaborate with their colleagues through discussion boards. And that's really important, as is curriculum, but it's the instructional practices on the ground, too, that move the needle for students. And that's not work that we're just starting with CORE. That's going to add on to it as we continue our work with students. So you can see there that quote in bold. We see this lots of places, so we could reference lots of cite lots of sources, but no single curriculum, no matter how high quality, and no single approach, no matter how comprehensive, can meet the unique needs of a school system. And that includes Wayzata. That was from EdReports this last August, but I've seen things of that nature cited various places. So CORE and our professional learning work and our curriculum evaluation process that we are always in is part of it, but we are also always doing work in the areas of building collective efficacy with our PLCs so that they are wrapping around students, thinking about how are they going to make a difference for their students in front of them. We have the equity inclusion team leading us in some work around culturally responsive teaching, about engagement strategies for all, basic needs of students and how we support students in knowing their own basic needs so that they can learn to their fullest potential. So this is all work that's happening. We're not, awaiting any guidance. I think our phrase has been awaiting guidance from MDE. That guidance is important, but we're continuing in this work. We mentioned the OG training for kindergarten teachers to support our youngest of learners in foundational skills. And we're also just going to give you a peek into that last bullet you'll see is Tier 2 Literacy Toolkit, just to show you some of the on-the-ground work. And this is one resource. It's not the only thing. We have a lot of resources that teachers are working with. But this is something that teachers have access to. So as they find students that have unique needs or perhaps need a boost in addition to the core instruction that CCC provides, what this is a full slide deck of options. And when you are in the actual slide deck, it has resources for K-5 staff and fluency, comprehension, all of those areas up there. When you go to any one of those categories, for example, I just chose phonological awareness, specifically because that is one area that we have one of those red dots from MDE that we're looking at. CCC has phonological awareness instruction, but some students need more, and they need more specific strategies. So when you go into this resource, there is some learning for teachers to consider, just kind of the bottom line basics around that area, that reading domain, along with some additional resources for them to learn from. And then there is a within the slides, list of strategies and resources. So I want to, this is a busy slide, but know that for teachers, it's telling them, here are your options. Here's, once you have identified the need with your PLC team, and here's an intervention that you can do with a particular student. This one happens to be from UFly. That's one of the resources. We harvested resources from reputable sources like UFly and Press and FastBridge, Reading Rockets, and others. And a lot of times it was like, oh, here's this strategy, and it's called this here and this here and this here, but it's that instructional practice. And then we also supported teachers in saying, like, here's a suggestion. This one, for example, on UFly is all digital. You move the beads across digitally. We want those beads in the kids' hands, the kids moving them. So we said, suggestion, can do digital. Highly recommend getting the materials into kids' hands. So we're doing that work and trying to, I think CORE is going to, again, partner nicely with the work that we're already doing, but we just wanted to give you a glimpse into some of the ways, one of the ways that teachers have access to just intensify the curriculum for the students that they're teaching every day.
And that Tier 2 slide deck that Julie went through, I want to add that is something that Julie and Ann have created by pulling through all of those resources, and then they've shared that with our literacy coaches who have that at their fingertips. So when teachers are in a PLC out in their building or at a built meeting, they're talking about students in needs and struggling with, that is a toolbox for them to refer back to that is just a wealth of ongoing knowledge. So it's just like a continual updating toolkit, and I would argue better than any single curriculum because it's pulling the best from a variety of resources and allowing teachers to personalize the response to the need. Okay, so I'm really excited about that work that's been going on and a heavy lift from Julie, but that was rolled out to our teachers then in, was it the September or the November?
In November officially, but we had other groups with their eyes on it ahead of time trying to think about how to best utilize it and how to use it in teams for various reasons. So we'll keep providing time and just support in that to wrap around the kids.
So kind of in a nutshell, I would call this your elevator speech if you're out and about. We've talked about the commitment of our READ Act to leadership, to curriculum, to professional learning, and to evidence-based strategies. But in a single 5 or 6 bullet points, what does that really all mean? Again, we're well positioned to satisfy the READ Act requirements, and teaching and learning has their arms wrapped around this solidly and will continue to do that connected work. Wayzata Public Schools has strong literacy foundations. We have literacy layered support, as Julie just showed some of that evidence-based practices, and our staff are highly trained and experienced from our leadership in our buildings to our teachers, paraprofessionals, and so forth. That's something we take very seriously. All K-5 teachers, elementary principals, teaching and learning team will begin the mandated professional learning core training this spring and summer, and it'll be completed by right around November of next year. And then again, just to reiterate, districts are not required to purchase approved curriculum. So Minnesota does not have mandated curriculum unless you're accessing those READ Act funds for purchasing. CCC edition 1 was purchased prior to that availability. And we will watch, we are just 2 years out to needing to replace that curriculum if there was no READ Act. So this will fit real well into that timing, and we'll be reevaluating that CCC second edition. And then we're just going to leave that quote again, that as we look at what moves the needle, you've heard whether it's Nate talking about CEL and built work or us talking about, what does research tell us moves the needle? And it's the teacher in the classroom and the principals in the building. Okay? And it's how they use those training, how they use that curriculum that makes the difference. And we're well positioned here in Wayzata with that. So with that, we'll take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Board colleagues, any questions, comments?
I have 2 questions. One, so the teacher's training, right, 44 to 48 hours on an average 8 hours per month. Is it in the batches of an hour, 2 hours? So once teacher starts training, like, can they do 30 minutes today, 2 hours tomorrow, or is there like specific course you have to finish?
We have kind of it's designed, we have an accepted sequence, but Tracy Kubitz, the rep, has us, you can easily go into the platform, do 15 minutes if you have 15 minutes, or if you have a day for 4 hours, you can work through it in 4 hours. It's very flexible. Yeah.
Great.
I think just to maybe further explain a little bit, the modules are asynchronous. So there are 9 modules. And then after the first 3, and then the next 2 and the final 3, there are 1 hour synchronous live sessions with a consultant. And we plan to offer a variety of options for teachers to choose for those synchronous sessions as well.
And there's even flexibility around the synchronous session. So it's not like you have to finish the first 3 before you could participate in a synchronous session. So we've got some flexibility around that too for teachers whose hours might not fit within the cube of the first 3 days. They could still participate in the synchronous session and then flexibly use their time to complete maybe that 3rd module that didn't quite get all the way through before the sync.
Okay, great. And I think, Julie, you're also connecting with other school districts to learn more. So anything to share? Are we learning from others? Is somebody learning from us? What has been that experience?
I think yes to both. I think Ann and I are always, well, all of us, but like I had someone from another district text me on my way here about what early childhood was doing and why is that. Like it's a constant back and forth. And we've been trying to learn from other districts the last couple of years as some districts were going through letters, learning from what worked, learning from what didn't work, and also being vulnerable and sharing ourselves. We've asked in that metro area curriculum meeting, what are you doing creatively with scheduling? How are you supporting your teachers? How are they, all the pieces, how are they getting paid? How are you using their time? And I think it's been a back and forth learning. I have a regular meeting with a couple people in neighboring districts, large districts that, both.
So it's fair to say all school districts are more or less in the same boat, facing same challenges, learning from each other. So nothing specific with Wayzata School District.
Yeah, and I would say some of our school districts did decide, letters training has been something the state has been promoting for a few years now, and some of our districts did decide to go all in on that. We were waiting to see what else might come forward or what was going to be the practice. We elected to have our teaching and learning staff. So Julie, Ann, and actually Bridget Austin have all been through letters training along with some of our special ed teachers. And it's about a 150-hour undertaking. And as Julie will say, it's not that the learning is any deeper, but the approach is kind of in triplicate. And so some of our districts are struggling with 150 hours is a lot to find for teacher time. And so I would say some of our districts are struggling that. So very grateful for the guidance that Julie and Ann brought forward and just said, let's go into this and learn more. And so we've really taken that approach. But July of 2025 is when phase 1 needs to be completed. So we felt like we got to get moving on this. And again, it's great training. It's just finding teacher time for this to do so we're not overloading any more than they already are.
Sure. The other piece, what do you want me to just... do you want to mention?
Yeah, just another benefit that we've come through into identifying core is its connection to our collaborative classroom curriculum. And the same rep we mentioned earlier is repping both of those. So we have, integrated and works closely with the curriculum we're using for our literacy.
Mm-hmm. And I'd say that's why, even though like we were mentioning, letters is around 150 hours, core is 50, but it's like a launching pad. That 50 hours just doesn't stop when it's done. Then we'll continue that work and embedded in CCC work. So ours will be much more than 50 hours. It's just that the 50 hours of core it's a good, foundational launching pad for lots of additional ongoing professional work that we are always working on.
Sarah, you had a question? Oh, Valentina, yeah.
I'll have several questions. One of them is, I heard that programs are chosen based on unique needs. What is Wayzata unique need?
Well, I think the unique needs of every learner. Are you with the quote and what that unique needs? I think we're referencing the unique needs of our K-12 students, and that all don't learn the exact same way. Some need more intensive instruction. So if we chose one curriculum and just listed as is. For example, you could see Wit and Wisdom was the knowledge building curricula up there, but when it went across and Austin was showing that graph, it said NA, like not applicable on phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary. So there are some programs that are really strong in certain areas and less strong in others, and there's not one that's like, this has got it all and it matches the needs of each and every learner in the classroom. So that's, you can just see, I think that just illustrates the complexity of the work teachers do every day. I was in a kindergarten classroom this morning with about 25 kids, and they were all, I mean, they were doing wonderful things, but they all they weren't a carbon copy of each other. They're all very unique. So that's what we're talking about, the kids.
Some more questions. Okay, we're going to be using that program. Then are we going to be progress monitoring? How we will be making sure that yes, there is a progress, or no, there is no progress. We need to do something else or use a different intervention. How often progress monitoring is going to happen, and and testing, and are we using a FastBridge for that?
Yeah, so that's just part of our regular ongoing work in the buildings and in the district. So we test in the fall, the winter, and the spring using the state's recommended assessment tools as well. Just today, we had a meeting then at a district level going over our data and seeing how our students are doing and what areas might we need to be adapting. Stacy Lackner, our Director of Research and Evaluation, has been holding sessions for our principals to look at that data and see what it means. In our next workshop days, giving that information to teachers and seeing how because all the data you have in the world is only good if it makes an impact in the classroom. And so our work has been in training our teachers how to take that FastBridge data and then use it in the classrooms. And that's really where our literacy coaches come in as well, is to be able to say, okay, what does this data mean and what adaptation might I make? But that process of feedback through data and testing is just ongoing in our system.
Dana, can I jump in there too? Because I see a really strong link to our PLC work as well. Our PLCs really address 4 questions. What is it we want students to know? How are we going to know they know it? What are we going to do if they aren't learning? And what do we do if they already know it? So I think through that process, we're looking at lots of different kinds of data, not only the FastBridge, but what do teachers see day to day in their small groups, for example, like what do these 4 students' spelling look like during my reading lesson? There's some good data. And so as a PLC, we might get together and say, you know what, I'm seeing my students not making progress in this. You know, after I've done what the curriculum tells me to do, what do I do next? So that's where we get into that responsive piece as well, with the resource that Julie described with the slides and things like that. And that's where we go to, one curriculum doesn't always tell us exactly what to do for each student.
Okay.
And if you would, a lot of times education has a lot of acronyms. Would you describe what a PLC is for everybody who may not be aware, and how a PLC actually functions? Because as a system, we have invested a lot of time, financial commitment, and we really believe strongly that PLC work will move the needle of a lot of our student outcomes. Could you describe that a little bit, especially for our new board members?
Sure. Sorry about the acronyms. They're everywhere. PLC, Professional Learning Community. And really what it is, it's a group of teachers who shares students and defines a goal, a learning goal based on standards and the understanding of what it means to meet the standard, what are the success criteria, and talking about what are we going to look at for data. How will we know students know it? Not just FastBridge data, because that only comes to us 2-3 times a year. So what is the ongoing data, whether it's the mastery assessments in our sets, whether it's our conferring notes, whether it's spelling, et cetera, word work. And then we talk about what do we do if students have already met those, and what do we do if they're not responding to the instruction that we've offered. So Nate, what would you add? Was that?
And say for those board members that are new, we had come to the board last year and most of our buildings, in fact, all of our buildings took teams to the PLC conference, and we'll be doing that again this year. And it's not just Wayzata's belief that PLCs make a difference, but that is, again, a proven research process that when teachers get together and talk about student performance and then what they can do, that builds their belief that they make a difference. That's what collective efficacy is about. And if you remember, that's the number one factor that impacts student learning and success in the classroom. So that's really PLCs, is bringing teachers together to talk about practice and use their collective brain and the data in front of them, whether it's street level data, meaning at the moment, or testing data to make instructional decisions.
And I think, Anne, you had asked, or you had stated the back end. What do you do when students don't know the information? And I think we have to highlight that that is so essential and so key, because so many of our kids respond to first-time instruction, but many don't. And so if a student is not responding to that initial instruction, what is the PLC able to do to be able to identify who those students are? Go back and reteach. And sometimes it's not reteach in the same way that you've always done it before. Reteach in a different format. Reteach and being able to look at it as an in addition to opportunity for students to have core instruction and supplemental instructional supports if necessary. So the PLC is gathering that data, they're reviewing where every student is, then they're responding appropriately as part of that cycle.
More questions. When implementation will start? When teachers will start using it? After they are done with training, or as soon as they started module? Let's say that I'm done with first module, I can start implementing it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's kind of with any learning, if that, depending on, this is K-5 group going through. So in the first few modules, fifth grade teachers who haven't worked with, primary learners might learn something new. And for others, it might be more review. Like I think back to the Orton Gillingham training I was doing this fall. I had a group come back and send me a video to two teachers the very next day. Here's what we tried from yesterday's class. And so there are, we haven't experienced core yet, but I'm really optimistic that there are going to be things that either they implement or cause them to think differently about reading in general, or students that they can implement immediately in their planning.
In fact, part of the training has teachers using some of those practical strategies in their classrooms as they learn alongside the training. So,
okay, that's nice.
Valentina, can I ask you how many more questions you have?
That's pretty much it.
One more?
No.
Not done?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Sheila, you have a question? Please. Thank you.
I just have a comment. There's a lot happening around reading instruction, and I appreciate, I know you guys are following this so closely, and it's a heavy lift for teachers. It's a heavy lift for all of you. Things are, on one hand, happening really fast, and on other, in other ways, it's taking a long time to get the information that you need. So I just thank you for the amount of detail in this presentation. I think it is helpful for us to understand, again, how does this, we get to really see from this presentation how this is impacting students, and how, what our best practices and, things that we might be hearing in the community or, in the news, to get your perspective and to hear how a lot of it is so aligned. I just really appreciate that. And I know our community really appreciates that. And thank you so much for your work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you have talked at length about how well positioned we are, and how a lot of this work is, we have a lot of foundation in our district already, and I really appreciate all of that. Can you, and this just dawned on me, but what is the new training going to offer our teachers that we don't already have? Do we know?
Well, we're able to see the module topics, and we have had, we have a strong foundation, but we also have, as we talked about, unique needs. Like, for example, fourth grade teachers saying, I have students in my room who the fourth grade standards and content, they need something else, and I need help in learning about that. So this K-5 look at how literacy develops from the ground up, I think is going to, for example, if you've taught fourth grade for 20 years, and now you have a student in your class that every student is different, but you feel like you need to do something different to meet that child's needs, I think it's going to give just this whole balanced approach on looking at reading as a continuum and how to support those students. And
Also give us common language. So I don't know that it's going to necessarily be skills that our teachers haven't necessarily had, but it does give us a refresher and it gives us common language around that work. And we have to remember that Minnesota has one of the largest gaps in reading, right? And so I commend the state. I may have approached the implementation differently, but I do commend the why. And this is an attempt so that we have universally, not only in Wayzata, but across the entire state, common language, common approach, common understanding, in an attempt to close that reading achievement gap in Minnesota. And I think that's something we all need to be invested in.
Anyone else?
The intent is, again, on both sides of the spectrum, right? So yes, when there is a special need, obviously how we handle it differently, but when you have gifted and talented, then you need to give them different boost, if you will, so they do better. So again, it's part of both spectrum, not like specific. Yes. Perfect.
All right, I have a couple of questions. One, you talked about the AWE 12-hour training that is reimbursed. Is that a part of the READ Act? Is that connected with the READ Act? Is there any benefit from that?
Yeah. No, the AWE Academy, so it's the Academy of Wayzata Educators, is unique to Wayzata, and it's built into our compensation plan called QComp, and that is a state program, but Wayzata was one of the first districts to onboard onto that, and so unique in Wayzata is the opportunity that teachers have to take a course once a year, generally taught for teachers by teachers. Anne and Julie have definitely taught their share of all classes, and teachers can sign up for that to increase their interest and get paid for that. We use our QComp dollars that we get from the state to pay for that. Typically then, a course that we're asking all of our teachers to take that we're mandating would not be eligible by Wayzata. That's in our own contract, would not be eligible for those dollars. But Stacy Voss and Corey Knudsen, representing the union, worked with us to provide that extra opportunity for our teachers. So that it would be a way, albeit small, to compensate them additionally for their time they're putting into this training.
Okay, thank you.
That's not a separate or additional training. That's time to complete the modules. If you needed more time than provided through the professional development days, that's something our teachers can take advantage of for additional time.
All right, thank you. The second question I have is with related to the curriculum that MDE has on their website. I spent some time this morning looking at that page, and I noticed that at least 2, maybe 3 times they talked about curriculum, including a focus on diversity, and because how different our students are now, the cultural differences, and therefore they are saying the new curriculum that they are proposing has to have focus on diversity. Does our old curriculum have that? We have something that has been there for 5 years, and
yes. In fact, when we were in our last review cycle, some of the things that are now those non-negotiables, I think they probably all were on our list of non-negotiables. We were looking for strong foundational skills. We were looking for culturally responsive instruction. We were looking for representation of lots of different folks. We wanted kids to see themselves in the books that we read in our classrooms, and that is, our teachers recognize that as a strength of the materials that we adopted.
Okay,
so yes.
All right, if so there are no other questions. Thank you, Dana, Austin, Julie, and Anne. And it's a lot of work, obviously, and there is a lot more to go yet, right?
Yes,
Even the MDE does not have a grasp on the total curriculum. I think the first and the third stage, or whatever you call that, there is still going to be more curricula added. I believe that's what I've been told.
I think there's a lot to come in
Yeah.
another legislative session, so we shall see, and it will keep us busy.
Good luck to you. Thank you so much.
You bet.
All right. Okay, so the next on our agenda is Dana giving the board an update on the elementary specialist schedule.
Yep, and so with that, I am going to turn it over to our 3 principals who are here who don't seem to want to run to the front here. So come on up. With us tonight, we have three of our principals here, and they're here to speak to some proposed changes to our specialist schedule at the elementary level and the need for those changes in order to provide a cohesive experience for our elementary students. So because they're their boots on the ground and the most knowledgeable of this, I'm going to turn the rest of it over to them.
We're supposed to turn this over. It's on.
Or did you expect me to do something?
All right, as an overview, probably a logical question would be, why might we be proposing changes? So we just wanted to highlight some of the primary drivers for the recommendation, which are on the board. We'd like to follow the state expectations. There have been some recent changes in statute, which we will go over momentarily. We'd like to try to create a more consistent experience for students, regardless of the building size. That doesn't necessarily mean an exact minute-by-minute experience. We'll get into that. It does mean that the classes that our elementary students have commonality. Right now, for example, in kindergarten, kids are getting a wide smattering of classes depending on the building we're in, and we think that we have a plan that can address that. We'd like to try to keep full-time teachers in our building. And I can speak for Greenwood. Ashley Farrington can speak for Birchview, but for a variety of reasons, primarily driven by school size and enrollment, we do not have full-time teachers to the degree that we think we could. And over the course of this presentation, we think we can show why. We think that matters a great deal to our students, and we have a plan that would maximize teachers being in the building all day long, thereby also reducing travel time, which they're paid for, and not working with kids. But it's more than just a travel time. It's actually building relationships, being part of the school community, and then also being able to help with things like intervention and the RAP process. That's an acronym, and I'm not sure what it stands for, but it's really important intervention work.
Iseta's response and action, yes.
All right, thank you. We always think of it as wrapping around support of our learners. The common prep time is another driver for this, and what that means is, we've talked a lot about professional learning communities. Common prep time means giving, for example, a grade level of homeroom teachers, whether it's a kid, use first grade for an example, or second grade, time to do the work where they're reviewing the progress monitoring data. And it's not just one person making determinations on their own, but it's a whole grade level owning the student learning outcomes and goals, saying, these are our kids. What did you do? I see that you had success with this, and vice versa. Also, when you have common prep time, or when you increase common prep time, you also inherently increase common learning time. Because when kids are not at their specialist, then they're in the classroom at the same time, which also opens up the possibility of teachers exchanging and doing unique things to help learners, whether it's some bursts of instruction, intervention, flexible grouping, and so on. And then lastly, we are hoping to simplify the scheduling process, and we'll highlight how and why.
One thing I wanted to comment on, especially after Dee Dee's presentation earlier tonight, the size of our buildings are very different, and the rate that we receive kids in our buildings is also very different. In the course of a summer, I'm at Northwoods, I'm Jenny. Nice to see all of you. I might receive over 100 students from June 1st to August 30th. I remember one year I spent at the IKEA parking lot with several teachers that had just found out that they were being transferred from one building to a different building because the class sizes had changed so much, the enrollment had changed so much in one building, and kids were coming to my building. I know Ashley at Birchview has had somewhat the opposite experience, where he's just waiting for more kids to come to see which schedule he's going to be running at a certain time. So I think overall, our team, since for sure Nate has been here, we've been talking about our schedule has really been a challenge. Our job is to meet the needs of our kids and to make sure they have a positive, predictable experience in all of our buildings. It shouldn't be dependent on our enrollment. And so I think that was one of our driving factors in bringing this forward.
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, to add on to that, there's an idiom about the tail wagging the dog. I've heard something like that before, and sometimes it does feel like our schedule is, our how we're planning learning is dependent on numbers and schedules and things we're adding at the last moment, whereby we would prefer to be really intentional with how we're planning learning and collaboration time. So that's a product of this proposal as well.
All right, so one of the pieces that's important to realize, I'm Ashley Farrington, by the way, the principal at Birchview Elementary. The recommendation would modify our elementary schedule to ensure compliance. There's new Minnesota state statute that states that students in grades K through 5 should get 3 of the 5 arts. And it's listed up there, but dance, media arts, music, theater, and visual arts. So this adjustment to this proposal will allow us to do that. Like Brad mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, right now in kindergarten, between the 9 of our schools, we're getting many different versions of that. At Birchview, our kindergartners do get PE and tech and music, but right now they're not getting art. At Greenwood, that might be different. At Northwoods, that might be different. So one thing we want to address coming out of this is that we want consistent experiences across the board, no matter which kindergarten you're in at which school. We feel like that's really important to address right now, and the state also feels that way.
So basically the solution that we came up with or was presented to us is that right now we run a 5-day digital day for all buildings, whether you have 450 kids or 820 kids. And I actually am in the sweet spot right now where most of my specialist teachers are full-time teachers. But if I added another section, I would refer to that as tipping, where I would need another person to come in and teach a section of technology, a section of art, a section of music, and a section of Phi-Ed. And so that becomes very challenging in August to find one person or 4 different people that are available in August to come in and do that, that type of schedule. So this new schedule actually allows the largest elementaries in the building, or in the district, excuse me, to run on that traditional 5-day specialist cycle. The more medium-sized schools, I would say like a Plymouth Creek, would be running on a 4-day digital cycle. And the smaller schools, Oakwood and Birchview, could run on a 3-day digital cycle, which would allow all the specialists in each of those schools to be a full-time employee in that building. I think one thing we've really taken away, and I've heard Ashley say this so often, and it's very true, is our kids really fall in love with their specialists. They love their Phi-Ed teacher, they love their art teacher. This is a person that they see for 6 years if they don't move. And it's really hard when you fall in love with that person and then they get transferred because they're not a full-time employee. It really matters. Those relationships are a big deal for our kids, and they're a big deal for us as well. So I think that is a value that really helped us move this schedule forward.
And in addition to wanting to have our kids have that connection over the course of a whole day, we also value our specialists, but when they're only with us for 0.2 of the day, and then they have to travel, sometimes to multiple schools over the years that's happened, they miss out on staff meetings, other core work and training that is essential to move lots of things forward in a school district. So I think the value, whether it's feedback from specialists saying they want to be valued in part of the community and vice versa. There's also kind of a trend that I've noticed at Greenwood, our 0.2 positions, because we're trying to share, if we have the tipping numbers that Jenny alluded to, if I have a 0.2, those are harder to hire for. People are always trying to move up in their not always, but most of the time in their full-time equivalent teaching points. But when they're shared between buildings, it creates a very interconnected schedule, so that if something, at Greenwood, we have 6 or 7 shared specialists this year. If one thing changes, it actually impacts multiple schools and start times. You can imagine the spider web or the Rubik's Cube. I tend to think most things are not impossible. That's a double negative. This is as close to being impossible as you can get without being impossible. So it is time to seriously reconsider things for the reasons that we've shared. We do want to share a visual because we understand that it's confusing and we know what we're doing, but we want to show you just so you can kind of see some of the things that we're talking about.
Yeah, so up there you see an example from actually Sunset Hill. Ross Williams is the principal there. And on the screen you can see this is what we go through. We kind of do the puzzle every summer, right? And you can see it's kind of day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. It's our current schedule that we did this year. In green, the bright green is his kindergarten sections. And one thing that we're running into challenges is when it gets so tight, we're asking our specialist teachers to take overages, right? And so that means they're doing in addition to what they're already doing. And so at Sunset Hill, right now, their reality is the specialist teachers, it looks like tech, is taking an overage to help make the schedule work. And we run into a lot of situations like that where we're making a deal to make it work on the 24th hour, right? You want to click to the next slide?
Sure, and an overage might be, it might be a teacher having half the prep they're entitled to and need, or not having prep. And in this day and age, with how hard our teachers working, it's hard to even go into a room and have that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Then you can see how we highlighted the kindergarten piece. And then if you go to the next slide, Brad. That's Birchview's schedule, so I can speak more to that. Birchview being the smallest building, we're shared with 4 different buildings. So that means I'm tied to Greenwood, I'm tied to Sunset Hill, I'm tied to Oakwood. And so anything I do, love my colleagues, I need to make sure we connected with them because it impacts it. So it's almost like we do this and we pull back and forth. And sometimes it's like the answer is right, it doesn't work. And it just doesn't work because it can't. So this will allow us to be able to own schedules within our building, which creates some flexibility. I think the move from 3 to 4 to 5 day allows us to do that with different building sizes as well.
I know this is exceptionally small. This is Greenwood's current master schedule, and I have some arrows highlighting. I think I'd just draw your attention to the random colors. Like if you look at Digital Day 1 in the upper left corner, there's green up above because that's before our shared specialist comes to Greenwood. And then like anytime a shared specialist is at another school, we can't have them, even if that's when we need them or our kids are ready for them. So then you just have to go to plan B, or technically it kind of usually goes to plan Z because there's so many things that have to happen. But this is more of like a before example. And then we wanted to, eventually we'll share kind of like, what is the after? What's possible? What might we do for our learners and staff? And that's where we're heading here. So under the new model, this would be a responsive schedule that fits, it's a 3-day rotation for a smaller enrollment school. And you'll see the headings across the top, the music, the Phi-Ed, the art, and the mixed art. And mixed art, I think of as technology. So it's not a mix of different types of clay. Yeah, it's technology. Yeah. We're trying to line up with some of the state language for the new statutes so that we're kind of all speaking the same language. Do you want to talk about the 3-day?
Yeah, so this is a 3-day model. So this is what it potentially could look like at Birchview, where you see students will have a 3-day. Students will get music, PE, and then at Birchview, what will be unique with Oakwood is we do a semester course of art that encompasses that visual arts component. So for the first semester, the kids at Birchview may get visual arts, and the kids at Oakwood would get that mixed arts. And then when the semester changes, which is this upcoming Friday, then we would flip to ensure that everybody gets what they need. And so we might only see the art teacher in the first semester at Birchview, and then we'll see the mixed arts component in the second. And so that's where we're at right now. And then here's an example of the 4-day rotation model.
So the 4-day is music, PE, art, and mixed arts. So they would just rotate every 4 days instead of every 5 days. We would no longer have that 5-day digital calendar on the webpage, right? I think that would be a plus, maybe. But we wouldn't have to share in this model where I would worry if I'm on a day 3 and Brad's on a day 2 because our people would be housed in our own buildings. So it would be an internal issue. And then I would be a 5-day building, as would Brad. And what we looked at is having 2 Phi-Ed sections in the 5-day rotation. So music, PE, art, mixed arts. And we talked about a second Phi-Ed class in that rotation because we have double gyms and we have the space. And it made sense for us in this case. And our kids really enjoy their bodies, and it helps them be better learners as well. So that's where we landed on the 5-day rotation.
One thing is important to acknowledge is that the math might not be exactly the same between the 4-day and the 5-day, but I think that's some of the work we'll be doing upcoming in February with the teaching and learning department. Like, how do we adapt with this 3-day, 4-day, 5? Because I know that's a question might come up, is like it feels different, but we will work hard to figure out how we can make that as consistent as we can.
And there are some interesting things to think about with ratios when you compare a 3-day to a 5-day. It might sound like, wow, they're getting FIAD twice a week at the 5-day, but once a week on the 3-day. Well, technically, it's once every 3 days and twice every 5 days. So it's still not minute by minute, but it's a little bit closer than it sounds once you think about it. It reminds me personally, and we haven't even had a time to talk about this as a principal group yet, but of some of the PLC work we're doing in our grade level teams with language arts, for example. What are the essential standards? Because we teach a lot, and we will continue to teach a lot, but there are some non-negotiable things we want each and every learner to walk away from their learning experiences with. And I do see a connection to whatever specials they have. If there is a little bit of a minute or class number variance, or even if there's a significant one, that we would just be planful with the curriculum and making sure that the essential standards are what all of our kids get.
I think one thing that we currently do, our current practice, is that we fill out our whole schedule 1 through 5, and then whatever we have left, or if a person is part-time, we might fill out that person's day with our kindergarten sections. So that's when Brad was first speaking. My kids have FIAD every day in kindergarten, but they don't have any of the other specialists. Where at Brad's school, they might have 5 different things in 5 different days just because that's the staff he has left. So in this new model, we schedule out 1 through 5 first, and then we hire a separate person that would be doing our kindergarten specialist schedule. So for next year, I'm anticipating that I'll have 6 or 7 sections of kindergarten at Northwoods. So that teacher would teach 6 or 7 sections of art to kindergartners, maybe the first week of the quarter. Maybe the second week, that person would teach tech to 6 or 7 sections of kindergarten students. So that person could rotate through the kindergarten curriculum from a specialist perspective, but it would be one person instead of little pieces of people filling out their schedule to meet the needs of our kindergarten students. So that's another big change in this model.
There are a couple other things just to keep in mind, and that some of us spend hundreds of hours on this trying to get it to work. So if you're like, why are they talking so much about it? It's just kind of what we do. So just give me an elbow if you're like, what? Give me that clicker, Brad. Yeah, exactly. But I digress. The schedule up here, some of our schools have variability between grade levels, and sometimes we call those bubble sections. So if you look at this hypothetical example, this would closely mirror what Greenwood could kind of resemble next year, just from a number standpoint. But you'll see there's a grade level up there with lots of orange. That's potentially a 7-section grade level. And then there's another grade level, 4th grade, that only has 4 classes, and it's just based on number of students. So instead of having part-time people drive, share at multiple buildings and then have everyone's schedule change if we have to respond to additional enrollment over the summer, this makes it very doable within a building to be responsive to whatever numbers we get, even if they change over the course of a summer, which is just mind-blowingly awesome. You might wonder, well, how would that look? And this is not a perfect example that we would launch. It's literally just to help us even get our heads around it. But an example of what could happen if a section were added. We could look in August, like happens, instead of then having to have all the elementary schedules change or many of them change, it could be adding time to the kindergarten specialist, and they might be able to pick up a grade level, for example, in a certain area. Or hypothetically, it could be if we really needed to. Under this model, the media specialists are not load-bearing, and load-bearing essentially means a homeroom teacher drops their class off and can literally walk away and go plan and use the restroom and other things. That'd be load-bearing. Not load-bearing means a media specialist can run the media center, curate the collection, and do a lot of the things that they're trained to do in their programming. But that person could pick up 1 class a day. That's why there's flexibility baked into this approach.
So like we are proposing, the revised specialist areas would include PE, music, art, and a new category termed mixed arts taught by our current technology teachers. Notably, because of the significant schedule constraints, we're proposing a removal from Spanish from the specialist model in the elementary program. Brad hinted at this already. The media specialists will now, the plan is for media specialists to be load bearing when the classroom section is added close to the start of the year. He illustrated in his third grade example, that might be a place where media would be added for them. At Birchview, second grade is where we have 4 sections where all other grades only have 3. So that in second grade, they would get media to help offset that bigger bubble section.
Ashley, if I may, I know one question that we received on this was about our media specialists. As you know, as part of our cost containment a couple of years ago, we did reduce our media specialists at the elementary level, or actually across the entire K-12 level, to half-time in those spaces. And so when you think about at the elementary level, if those people are teaching courses, in addition, load-bearing, meaning they're responsible for students, it gives them less flexibility to be responsive to all the needs of the building and to run the library. So in this or the media center, so in this situation, this plan also gives back some time to our media specialists to do the jobs that they're trained for and to be responsive to student needs because they're not tied to a schedule. So that's another win coming out of this.
Helping to lead author visits and plan for those. I Love to Read Month and just kind of building the community throughout the month. Those are things that historically many media specialists have been able to do, but just with how their schedule's been, it's been tricky, but this would help address that. I want to connect a few dots quickly. At some of these slides we've gone over very quick, so fortunately we'll pause at the end so we can give them the time they're due for comments and questions. But initially the state provided 5 options within the statutes, and you maybe recall the couple that we did not recommend going with. One was adding dance to the curriculum, and one was adding, I think it was theater. Lots of reasons for that. Just one is we already have some families in our communities who opt out of music for religious reasons, and we didn't feel it would be inclusive or important to add additional classes that kids would have to opt out. We thought by choosing from the other 3, we could give kids really great experiences while meeting the statutes. So in case you're wondering a little bit about the thought process behind that, we also talked about, because the state gives us the statutes, but we get to decide as a school district, how are we going to implement these and follow the standards? So we could have hypothetically, if it comes up, well, did you think about asking a homeroom teacher and just adding technology to their load, for example, instead of supplanting or, we could keep things complex hypothetically and keep Spanish and add classes within the homeroom day and have that. That's very tricky. There's pros and cons to everything, but it's very tricky to ask teachers to take on and do more when we're already feeling kind of strapped for time. So adding it to the homeroom experience without a specialist doing, for example, mixed arts or visual arts, whatever one you want to pick in that example, it's tricky.
And then the last side hints that Jenny alluded to this. We'll have kindergarten, which will be a standalone specialist. So at Birchview, we're predicted to have 3 sections right now. That can change. Hopefully, we're working really hard to get as many kids as we can. But when we do that, we will have a kindergarten standalone specialist, and that would most likely be shared with another building, right? Because we only have 3 sections, 4 sections, 5 sections of kindergarten at most of our schools. So realistically, that can become whole. And so there might be some sharing in that.
Or they could pick up some of those overage.
Yeah, and they can pick up some of those overages. So that's what we'll see. And so within that kindergarten, so one teacher will then teach that PE, music, mixed arts, and the visual arts on how they decide to go through that process. And we will support them through that.
Did you flip it?
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. So this is the timeline that we've been going through. Our team has met numerous times to process this. We know this is really hard for a lot of people. I had a very challenging conversation with my Spanish person just because I've known her and I care about her a lot. And that's not what this is about. This isn't about saying that we don't value these people, because we do. But this is the work that we've been doing the last several months, I would say, as a team. We met with Dr. Anderson and shared with him our thoughts as a group. We tried to come up with a way to run these schedules, the 3, 4, and 5 model, with part-time people, and it's really not possible. The more we thought about it, to Brad's point, it's kind of like Jenga. You keep pulling out blocks and eventually they tumble down. So I think this is just where we landed, even though it's been challenging. Today we are here with you. We've met with our Spanish teachers. And I think we've also talked to our specialists and our staff as a group just to let them know what was coming. We know difficult meetings are at this time of year are really challenging for a lot of people, wondering what's going to happen. I really commend Dana and Stacy and Nate and the team for giving us this opportunity early in the scheduling season. Knowing is difficult, but not knowing, I think, is harder. So that is where we landed, and let us know what questions you might have for us.
And I will add to what Jenny said. I feel like we've been working on this for actually multiple years. And while we're working on processes to treat our traveling specialists with the dignity and time and support they need, it also creates extra complexity on the scheduling, because while providing adequate travel time, which is an essential no-brainer thing you have to do, it just makes it hard to have things work. So it's I don't want to call it untenable, but it's been really challenging, and we are excited to talk about possibilities while also, Jenny, as you eloquently said, just honoring and thinking about the human beings involved in this important work.
For sure. And in my world, this is now my 4th year at Birchview, and I've had to hire 3 different music teachers. And I think that's because, right, we were always part-time and people seek full-time employment, which we want that. And that does impact the student experience at Birchview, right? PE, we've had to hire 2 teachers. So the turnover at our smallest schools, you see a faster rate. And like Jenny said, and I'm a firm believer of this, our specialist teacher are cornerstones of our buildings, because they get to see kids through the program and they get to support kids and see those lights that sometimes they may not see in their classrooms, right? There might be somebody really excited to go to art because of that connection they have with the art, and they're excited about art, and that's their moment of success. And we want to lean into those relationships a little bit more. So I want to really at least add to that piece, because I think continuity of staffing is really, really important for that ultimate student experience that we're going for.
Couple of add-on pieces there. Then you'll notice at the last one there, February, once we come out of this session and time, then teaching and learning will begin to work with our teachers to create that mixed art course. If you go back to the beginning of the presentation where we have to offer 3 of the 5 that are there, this mixed art course will be that 3rd one. And so you'll notice that it does have to have baked into it either that dance, that media art, or the theater, but we can do that embedded into a look at that technology and think creatively around that. So Aubrey Brar will be heading up that work along with teachers, and we'll have some K-12 representation on that as well. And then in addition to, the sunsetting of Spanish at the elementary obviously has a K-12 implication. We have been talking at the middle level about opportunities there. So as we move forward into middle school review, potentially even next year, on how do we bump up that experience at the middle school level so that we can have a real full year robust opportunity there and potentially actually deepen students' learning specifically to Spanish. And so that will be some work that will be forthcoming, not this year, but the following year in our Spanish programs as well. So, just wanting to make sure that we are addressing that K-12 implication of that the Spanish as well. Thank you, and they'll take questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Any questions, board colleagues? Sheila?
Can you help me understand why we have to get rid of Spanish, and as it relates to, is it just because we have an added mandate from the state to add something and there's no room in the schedule? I'm having a hard time understanding how it ties in.
Yeah, good question. I think that's one of the reasons why in the beginning we tried to highlight 5 drivers for this. So the state statute alone, I don't think was the primary decider. I think actually trying to create a schedule that is workable and can really put learning in the Common Prep and just have it be viable to work with is just as big a reason. Yeah, thanks for asking.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll go a teeny bit deeper, so thank you for that. On the PLC work we're talking about, I think what we're trying to do and what we're really serious about in the district that I've noticed is get better at teaching and learning and ultimately have kids get better, for example, in reading. So all of this READ Act training doesn't exist in a vacuum. Teachers are going to be taking it in and then having conversations about data and continuing. I mean, these are things that are happening already, but we're trying to get better at it too. So ensuring common prep, or at least maximizing it to the extent possible, is a really, really important thing. So at Greenwood right now, we have at least one grade level, and it's really anytime there are 7 sections that float through, it's like fireworks on the schedule, and the teachers are just kind of passing ships in the night. I mean, you might get them together a little bit once a week, and by a little bit, I really mean a little bit, but that to drive the work to the extent that we're wanting to together with them, it doesn't feel as realistic as we want it to be. So that's part of it.
You. It sounds like there is just too much to fit in, and we can do, everything a little bit, or we can choose things to do really well, and something has to give. Unfortunately, it sounds like it's Spanish. I know that's a valuable part of our district. And you're talking about maybe expanding opportunities at the middle school level. Is there also another option through community ed that might become available?
Yeah, so those are some of the things. Right now we have a strong partnership with KTAL. And so it's always great with KTAL. All of us have our upcoming Get Ready for K Nights, and they already like, can we get into your K Night presentation? So they're excited to continue that partnership, and we want to. In addition, though, because we know we don't want financial barriers. So one of the things that we want to explore with Jenny Ebert, we've been tapping into this Go scholarship, what allows us to offer courses and then give it free scholarships to that. And so that's something we want to explore through the community ed, because we do think that's a way that we can get at some of it in addition to KTAL.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to our team that came to present tonight. Thank you so much. I think I want to be able to take a step back, and something that Jenny Berg had shared about the complexity, and this goes back from my very first days in this district. I think some of my very first interactions with principals were about the complexities of the schedule and changes as we were adding sections in August, and how do you build this out? Our principals, I think it's important to know, they spend days and weeks trying to build this and then rebuild it again. Principals will lay out schedules with multiple buildings on kitchen tables, trying to move the puzzle pieces around. Dr. Gustafson talked about how he has spent last summer over 100 hours alone trying to make his specialist schedule work. When we think about the difference between operational work and instructional leadership, we've asked and invested in the work around the Center for Educational Leadership to improve our principals as instructional leaders. The rub that happens is when they spend so much time on the operational side, they don't get to focus on the instructional side. The difference between 100 hours and Brad being able to spend, truthfully, maybe 30 minutes or less in the future on the schedule frees up 99 and a half hours for him to do true instructional leadership planning for his team. I think we cannot understate the value of freeing that time up for our principals to do what we ask them to do and not get stuck in the minutia of the operational side of things. So I just had to add those pieces in. Thank you.
I want to say thank you from before. Sorry, thank you from before and the countless hours. One would say you could add the countless days, right? We might even be at a month for some of you that have been doing this for a while, that you have devoted to your life to making a schedule. But I also think, in addition to the workload for you, and to just go a little bit deeper into what Dr. Flansburgh said, it's also the consistency for the teachers and for the students. So if I'm a 0.2 and I'm a rock star, or I have a part-time, I might go, but I don't know if I'm going to have that job again next year, right? And so how am I going to give my all? Am I going to be looking so there's that level of consistency. Additionally, and Mr. Farrington, I know, right? It's been traumatic to see incredible people that are at your school that then need to get moved or whatever. And so there's a huge human aspect, not just for your time, but really for our community. And it's hard to say no to something. And we know that Spanish is a loss, and for that I feel bad. And at the same time, I think there's a big bucket of things that we can give to our whole community in making this choice, and it's been a courageous decision. So Thank you for your work and for that decision.
I have a question, just simply trying to understand. Let's say grab second grader and give me an example how the year will look like for the student.
So in second grade, you probably do you want to go back to the slide so we can provide a visual?
I can try.
I'll try. So basically, a second grader, no matter what school, will get PE, they'll get music, they'll get art, and then they'll get mixed art, right? But the only difference is depending on the digital day cycle. So you might be on a 3, a 4-day, or a 5-day. So you cycle on through it every 3 days, or you cycle through it every 4 days, or you cycle through it every 5 days.
And I think one of the differences that Sheila was talking about too is that we only offer Spanish to 4th and 5th graders. So I have a huge school. I have over 800 kids, but my Spanish teacher is only a 0.4. Some years she's a 0.3. So regardless, even if I had 1,000 kids, she would never be full-time at my school. So she has to leave every day and drive to East. So she starts at my early start school and ends at the latest start school in the district. So her day starts at 7, 8. I mean, the bell rings at 7:45, and her end of the day bell rings at 4 p.m. My kids at Northwoods are done at 2:25. That's a typical school day. So regardless, a FIAD teacher, all the other subjects would be 1 through 5. So you can make them full-time employees based on the rotation. But because we don't have an immersion school, right? Not everybody has Spanish in 1 through 5. That person would never be full-time. Does that make sense? Okay.
And is it only with Spanish? Okay.
To be honest, I also learn 3 languages. My husband knows 3 languages. We were baffled to see that there is 1 lesson per week, and we were kind of, what's the point? Because when you're learning language, you have to have a certain repetition in order to retain it. And then when they're going to block schedule, again, we are having hard time understanding how you can retain. You might get A for that particular time, but I'm wondering when half of a year passed and then you have to come with, yes.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I think for what the deck or the cards that we've given our Spanish teachers historically, they've knocked it out of the park. They've made it for our 4th and 5th graders once a week. It's been a really, I'm inspired and proud of what they've done, especially some years I have had at Greenwood a person who's traveled to 3 different sites over the course of the day while giving kids a really cool experience. And in full disclosure, Spanish doesn't work for every student either. There are some who are learning, trying to learn English, and that's a tricky thing. But that wasn't a driver for this. But I'm just pointing, it didn't work for each and every. I think my point was, our Spanish teachers have been phenomenal, and through this planning conversations, we've said kind of the Wayzata way. If we're going to do something, let's do it really well. Like, let's choose what we can do really well and prioritize. And this is what we feel we can do really well. If we wanted to relook at it and try to have, I don't want anyone to panic, but like 9 immersion schools, like I don't even know how that would work, but that's a different conversation. But I think this is what we can do and be proud of, and then build up in the middle school, or have those conversations and try to backfill and make K-TAL a viable partnership, or continue that and look for other options. We just felt like we could, in a really proud way, do well with this, as opposed to not being as good as we want to be.
Maybe then it makes sense to put to have them in middle school, and they'll be full-time. Then they don't have. I'm talking about Spanish teachers. Since, I mean, you showed that they're very good. So if we keep them for full-time at middle school level, then maybe that will allow students to also to retain language and use it in their life, if it's possible.
I have one quick comment. I want to underscore all the thank yous that Sarah said. I personally, Heidi speaking on behalf of Heidi, I want my principals working on teaching and learning in schools. And so this is really, really important so that we can move the needle for each and every one of our students. So thank you for taking the lead on this. It means a lot to me to hear directly from you on how it's going to impact your school communities. So thank you for being here tonight. The other thing that I just want to lift up, and I think you spoke about it, but I just want to lift up because we talked about it earlier in the evening, is that this shared development time or this shared common prep time is going to enable the work of the PLCs. And I just want to lift that up again and give you an opportunity to say anything else you might want to about that.
Yeah, I'm happy you mentioned that. Today was a PLC day at Birchview, which is really, really important, right? And mid-year assessments are coming out. And as a teacher, I don't want my second grade team today, I don't want them to look at it as this is only my problem to own, or this is only my data to own. This is our data to own collectively, right? And so when you have that common time, that allows you to do that, right? For the first time ever at Birchview, especially in our pods, is another reason why he talked about common learning time. It's really, really hard for a pod to operate if half of the pod is doing math, which is traditionally can be a louder subject, and the rest is doing something else, right? That impacts that. And so being able to have a standard schedule allows us to do win times. You might know it as my times at the high school or flex times. Then allows us to individualize and support even farther, because we can say in second grade, we're going to have win time from 10 to 10:30. And that's where we're going to bring all the adults in that space around that grade level and really give them what they need. You can't do that if you have conflicting schedules within a grade level, right? So that's a plus. And then the PLC work of Brad and I are on the same team. Brad is really strong at kids who are struggling with reading, and I feel really good at the ones who I want to extend. All right, Brad, can you pull all those kids and help me out? And I can take the opposite. We can do more of that when we are on the same consistent schedule.
I also think, and then I'll stop talking, but I also think, to Dana's point and the READ Act, we all were a little nervous when we shared the 40 whatever hours or whatever, but our PLCs are really families. They spend more time with their colleagues a lot of times than they spend with their family members awake. They love each other. Sometimes they fight like siblings, but they're loyal. They're super loyal. So I got up there with my PowerPoint. I'm like, I'm going to share it. I'm just going to tell you what's going to happen. And honestly, the collegiality, if that's a word, that we got this, that's going to be fine. Do you want to do it together? Do you want to do it individually? Was beautiful. Like, they didn't flinch. And I was really proud of them, but I think that is because they spend so much time together and really have that, they have each other's back. And it's so very exciting for what's coming ahead.
Thank you, colleagues. Just have one comment. When I saw the three words, retain full-time, in the first couple of slides, I was so thrilled, for retain full-time, because we can't have specialists going back and forth between buildings. And then later on, I saw that we would have to eliminate some of these Spanish specialists. And as you said, Principal Farrington, I think it's a hard decision to make. This is my third year on the board, and no matter how used to I get to it, it is never going to be easy. Never going to be easy. It'll always hurt. So thank you for doing all the work. And it's the board that, as a board, we have to make the decision eventually. But thank you for the presentation tonight. All right. All right, the next item on the agenda are the Human Resource Service reports. And Human Resources Executive Director Stacy Voss will give us an update on the calendar planning. Thank you, Stacy.
Good evening, Wayzata School Board. I'm coming before you one last time before you approve the 2024-2025 calendar to let you know that we have sought out feedback from the calendar committee, which has a building. Every building has a representative. So those representatives have taken this back to their building staff to get their input. And in addition, based on how the calendar is connected to the READ Act this year, I also was in person in many of those buildings to solicit their feedback in person. And a good piece of feedback that we received, that we worked, I guess I could have had those 3 wonderful principals speak to this as well. But our elementary teachers, when they saw that we were doing a 6th and 9th grade orientation day on that first day of school, kind of chimed in and asked if that would be an appropriate time to facilitate the Hopes and Dreams conferences for our kindergarten students and families. And in having that conversation with our teachers, with teaching and learning, and with our elementary principals, we really felt that that made a lot of sense. We recognize that we may not have enough time in the regular 8-hour day, so we're also going to combine that Hopes and Dreams time with their open house hours. So it will work very well for our kindergarten teachers, families, and students, and so we're excited to be able to offer that special attention to our new students coming in to our district in kindergarten, and then to our new students coming into our middle schools, and our new students coming into our high schools. So we're very excited about that. And that is the only recommended change in all of the feedback that we asked for that was recommended. Otherwise, as you scroll through, Amy, if you just want to scroll down so they can review it, there were no further changes. And then if you scroll down to the very end, you will see that all of our numbers are in compliance with our contract. As you know, we need to have 172 student contact days, the only exception being at our elementaries because they have their 2 planning days, and with our seniors because they get out early. They've fulfilled their requirements and we give them some time to prepare for graduation. But you will see that our 6th through 11th grade and transition students are all in school for 172 days. And then you will further see that our teachers are fulfilling their contract days of 184 days, all accounted for on this document. So with that, if you have any questions, I would certainly be willing to attempt to answer those.
Board colleagues, any questions, comments? Seen this before?
Stacy, I think there were a couple other days. I know one of the community members spoke last time when the calendar was being discussed. Have those been added?
No, what the survey and what the district has decided to do is to maintain their long practice of simply observing federal holidays. All of the holidays listed on there are federal holidays. We did not get substantial feedback from our community when we surveyed them to see if there was a specific additional observance that they would like to acknowledge. And then just having conversations as a leadership team, we really felt it probably made more sense to maintain our commitment to following the federal holidays versus trying to, and we want to honor and be respectful of everybody's religious observances, but kind of differentiate in between a religious observance and a federal holiday.
Anyone else? So Stacy, I have a question I had asked. So just requested that 2 holidays be added to the bottom right. I cannot scroll through my screen here, and I cannot see that far. So are they in there?
They are not. Thank you for that reminder. I think you had mentioned that, and I said I was going to do it, and it slipped my mind. But I will reconnect with you on that, and you will see that when you approve the 24-25 calendar at your next board meeting.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for that reminder. I appreciate it. That's what you were talking about too. Okay, my apologies. We'll get that.
I guess I will. Yep. Just a thank you. Thank you to HR and thank you to Teaching and Learning for one, slowing this down. There was certainly a lot of feels and brushing things in at the end of the year. And then second of all, to take some time to think about developmental milestones and integrating that kindergarten piece. So to our community members who I know have been talking about wanting the calendar and where is the calendar and what are we doing, we apologize for this delay. And at the same time, thanks for taking the time to get it the way that we want it to be.
Every year we hope it gets easier, and we haven't quite experienced that yet. Maybe next year.
So will this come up for approval in the next board meeting then?
Yes, you will have to officially vote to approve the 24-25 calendar.
Okay, thank you. Okay, sounds good. Thank you. If there are no other questions or comments, let's move on to the next item. Thank you, Stacy. All right, final agenda item for the evening is the superintendent's reports, and Superintendent Dr. Anderson and Associate Superintendent Dr. Flansburgh will share an update on the district's strategic roadmap and operations plan. All yours.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you for giving us an opportunity tonight to provide some additional background in regard to our strategic roadmap. So when Jenny Berg was in the room, one of our principals that just presented, I would have had to have said I'm probably, well, only the two of us were here for all 5 generations of our strategic roadmaps going back to 2008 when I started my work in this role. We've had updates of our strategic roadmap. Well, first when I came in 08, we had what we called district directions, and they were just sort of general themes and focus areas that the school district was striving towards. And then in 2011, we created our first strategic roadmap. So you've seen various versions of that, depending on how long you've been on the board or how long you've been paying attention to the roadmaps that are on our website. And we created a new strategic roadmap in 2011, and that was fully equipped with a mission, a new mission statement, vision, core values, and strategic directions. And then we reviewed that again in 2015, 2019, and most recently 2023. You may recall that you approved the updated strategic roadmap in the September regular school board meeting at the beginning of the school year. So I wanted to just share a little bit of the overview in regard, and a copy of the strategic roadmap is on board books, so you have access to that within your board materials. And to just share quickly the mission, which is our core purpose, and it states the following. This has, I think, remained almost identical since 2011. We haven't really changed that at all. It's to ensure a world-class education that prepares each and every student to thrive today and excel tomorrow in an ever-changing global society. And we also have our vision statement. This is a little bit of a condensed version, a little more streamlined than what was on the previous roadmap. But there really are 3 key areas there, and they are exceptional student learning, experiences and relationships, community trust, confidence, and partnership, and operational excellence. And sometimes I refer to that as somewhat of our business model, in that regardless of the type of an enterprise or an organization that exists, they all tend to have 3 key things in place. One is those set of products and services, or what is it that we provide to that second component part, which is the customers. And the third component is operational excellence, or all of the operations of the district, which really strives for that sweet spot of efficiency and effectiveness. And that comprises our vision statement. We also have 6 core values, and I'll just read those without the narrative that goes with them from the roadmap, but they focus on achievement, collaboration, community, equity, integrity, and respect. So those are our 6 core values. Those have also been in place for quite some time. The presentation that we have for you tonight is an update on the strategic direction development, and we've been in progress with that. Beginning somewhat in the fall and carrying forward now into the current time. We're seeking to bring greater detail to our strategic directions, and Dr. Flansburgh's going to give us a flight through some of the work that we've done to this point and give you an update on that. I think with those 5 different generations of the roadmap, one that I would refer back to is 2008, and then 2011, 15, 19, and 2023. I think we could say with each one there's been increasing levels of specificity and focus on greater detail. So something that Nate's been really helpful with is developing the more detailed district operational plan. And along with that, and we aren't at that point yet, but really defining, okay, what is the work? And then how do we measure it? And how do we know when we've been successful? I think we've been focused in some really good ways with themes and directions over the years of those 5 generations of the roadmap. But there's always somewhat of a challenge with what do we measure and how do we report back to the community and how do we report to the school board. And in many ways, we've allowed our standardized test scores to be some of that reporting. We give an annual report from our teaching and learning department on student test scores and success variables based on standardized testing. But we know that there's far more to a student's experience than just a test score. And we're really looking for better ways to measure student success against those strategic directions. So that's kind of my overview and lead in, if you will, for Nate to take us through some of the work that our strategy leadership team has been focusing on. And our building principles are tied into this as well. And there'll be some commingling along the way with this work, along with the CEL, or instructional leadership work that Nate's doing with our principals. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nate and have him take us through a number of slides.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Anderson, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the board. I want to really just take some time to walk through not only what have we been doing to get to this point, but what does that mean for us going forward? So as Dr. Anderson said, the strategic directions and our roadmap in particular was recently updated. And for those who are new to our board, being able to take a little bit of a step back too, we've been doing some significant work within the board to be able to update that strategic roadmap. There were a lot of planning sessions, there was a lot of professional learning that was taking place, and there was also something that we called scanning sessions. And the scanning sessions really took place on 3 different levels. The school board and the superintendent's office came together, and we really started to talk about what do we aspire for the next 3 to 5 years to be as a system. Our strategy leadership team was brought together, and they were asked what are the themes that they see as some of the most important and pressing things that we need to accomplish in the next 3 to 5 years. And then we brought our principals together, and we asked them that same question. We then gathered all of that information together and we overlaid it and we said, what are the common themes across all 3 of these groups that we are seeing that we can really start to bring back and guide our work? And there were some pretty consistent themes. And really, if you look at the strategic directions, and we kind of have these in a little bit of a rank order on purpose. When you look at number 1, ensure a high quality daily experience for each and every student. As Dr. Anderson said, yes, we recognize that it is our goal and our job to make sure that we are providing an amazing and excellent academic experience for every student. But when kids come to school, how are they actually being welcomed into the building? How are they finding their sense of belonging? Because there's an old TED Talk that I used to always quote, kids don't learn from people they don't like. And so are we creating the conditions for kids to really be connected to the adults that they're learning from? And I would say across the board, every single one of our schools has that as one of their school improvement goals. When we talk about the things that they're working on and trying to get better at, that is one of those things that they're trying to focus on. As well as number 2, delivering a high quality instruction that leads to high academic achievement for all students. So we want to be able to ensure that we're just, again, I'll go back to our conversation regarding the READ Act, some of those literacy updates, and recognizing that first time instruction for a vast majority of our kids works. And we also know that we're not there yet. So we have a lot of really specific work to be able to do, and that's why the PLC work is so essential. Theme number 3 that came through, recruit, hire, support, develop, and retain the highest quality staff. We know that we're in a time when education is feeling the pinch of teacher shortages, sub shortages. The pools are getting a little bit more shallow for all of the positions we seek and we look for. So what are we doing to not only bring in the best candidates that we can, what are we doing to make sure that they stay and that we're providing them the professional learning and development that they need to become amazing and excellent at everything that they're doing and leading up. What are we doing to build awareness, number 4, and capacity to improve the health and well-being of our school district community? Notice it doesn't say just students, the school district community. That means our teachers, all of our staff across the system. We want to make sure it's a good place where everybody comes in and is having a good experience. Number 5, learning and improving from community engagement strategic partnerships. Number 6, ensuring the effective and efficient use of district resources. And number 7, align internal district processes and procedures to improve communication, decision-making, accountability, collaboration, resulting in operational excellence. So many of you have seen this image before. We call it the instructional through line. When you look at this, improving instruction takes all of us engaging in the work of alignment. At the bottom, you see the school board. You're at the bottom for a reason, because it's foundational work. What happens here dictates what happens in our system. And if we're not aligned from the school board to the superintendent to SLT to our principals to our teachers, our students don't get the high quality desired experience that we desire for them. You've often heard me say, I see this as a linking of the chain. And no one individual in that chain has the right to break the link. Because if it does, it throws an entire system out of whack. So when we say, well, here's what our expectations are for literacy instruction, what we would not expect is an individual teacher to say, that's fine, but I'm going to do my own thing. We say we are aligned as a system so that we ensure high quality experiences across the board for everybody. When we talk about the shift from strategic directions to the district operational plan, this will be our first district operational plan that we've had. I think it's important to recognize we've had lots of conversations, even when I came in. I think a lot of times they were referenced as Chase's goals. We would sit at the table and say, hey, what are Chase's goals and what are we doing? Realistically, Chase's goals are our district priority goals. So what are we doing to be able to really bring some greater clarity? And then what is the work of the strategy leadership team in that process? Because we recognize we're an interconnected group and we have some opportunities to improve our efficiencies, our communications, and get better as a system. So when we look at the strategic directions to the DOP, what is the work of the school board? To work in policy governance. That has been a significant amount of professional learning that the board has engaged in over the past 2 years, and we continue to engage in that on a quarterly basis. Set the conditions for the superintendent and administration to do the daily management of the district. So recognizing you set the conditions for us to be able to do our work exceptionally well. It's your job to help us establish the strategic directions. You approve them. Accountability to the strategic directions, the DOP, and the outcomes. It's your job to hold us accountable to how are we doing our work? How are we actually meeting our goals as we're moving forward? The work of the superintendent, it's really to establish the priority work of the district through the DOP. Oversee the implementation of that. I often like to refer to Chase as the orchestra conductor up front. And he's making sure that all of the instruments in the musical are hitting their notes at the right time. He holds us accountable to the strategic directions and the outcomes and provides an annual overview of the results and the DOP planning for the goals. And you'll see how this works as a continuous cycle of improvement as we go through the work. The work of the strategy leadership team is to help refine the goals, the strategies, the performance indicators, and timelines of the DOP. SLT members serve as the key leaders in the implementation of the goals. They present at board meetings and/or work sessions to provide ongoing updates, and they lead the DOP work within their teams and departments. So again, Chase in and of himself does not lead each of those goals. He's the orchestra conductor working with the strategy leadership team, and it's our job to be able to work across the system to say, how are we implementing all of these things that we are saying will lead us to meeting the strategic directions of the district? So again, what is the DOP? Short for District Operational Plan. It's an annually approved document that guides the priority work of the system. While some goals may be multi-year in nature, it defines the work happening within 12 months to move progress towards meeting the goal. It is approved by the board, and it's led by the superintendent's office and the strategy leadership team. It is a public-facing document of the work being done by the district leadership team. What you're not going to see is 40 pages of details, because that's on the back side of the management side. That's our work behind the scenes sometimes. Your job is to be able to say, all right, here's the high level information that we need to make sure that we get to you. And then how are we measuring that information as we bring it forth? Those DOP goals are reported out regularly, as we talked about at the work sessions. We want to make sure that the board is appraised of the work happening within the system to meet our district's strategic directions. It also allows for transparency of the work happening in the system by publicly reporting the progress on the work taking place. It also helps us prioritize our commitment to continuous improvement. How are we taking that data and that information and then responding to it? We often use a phrase when we go out to meet with the built teams, again, building instructional leadership teams at each of our sites. It's okay to be where you're at. It's not okay to stay there. Where we are and where we begin, it's the reality. This is our starting point. So how do we continuously improve? What the DOP is not. It is not all-encompassing of everything happening in the system. It focuses on the priority work management is overseen to strategically meet our district goals. It is not always quantitative in nature. I think it's really important to recognize we do use a lot of quantitative data. We are constantly looking at how are students performing, how are we measuring their growth? And at the same time, when we look at our strategic directions, not everything is quantitative. Many of those components might be qualitative in their measurement. I would use, for an example, the READ Act, and when we think about the core training that the teachers are going to be going through. The core training, that is a measurement to be able to say, did we accomplish, did all of the teachers go through it? Did they meet the expectations? Did they test out on the quizzes that they need to be able to take? Well, did everybody accomplish that? Well, that's a qualitative measurement. Quantitative, we could say the numbers, yes, it's a checkbox. They measured it and they accomplished it. But now what do they do with the learning that they just took place? How are they implementing that into the classrooms? Well, led by the board, it's approved. Again, it's led by the board. It's approved by you, and the superintendent's office and SLT lead the day-to-day implementation. We wanted to be able to share what the document structure will look like. So there's going to be a strategic direction tied to multiple goals. For some strategic directions might have a singular goal that's attached to them. But it's being able to say, what is the rationale? Why are we doing this work? What is the goal? What are the strategies? What are our performance indicators? And what is the timeline? We also have leaders that will lead it up within each of those categories within SLT. So that first one, again, is ensuring that high quality daily experience for each and every student. So as a district, what are the operational plans that we're doing to meet that desired outcome? Delivering high quality instruction. What are the things that we're doing? And notice I shaded this in on purpose because I'll go back. On the first page, it'll say shaded goals indicate board approved priority goals. So as a board, we would be looking to you to say, what are the ones that you are looking for us to be able to say are the most important? We'd be making recommendations, but this would be an example of one where we would highlight it, and there's not a goal there on purpose, but to just share. We would shade those out and say, these are some things that we're kind of creating a premium focus on, and it's going to take a lot of our time to be able to do this and do this well. Again, going back when we talk about recruiting, hiring, supporting, and developing and retaining highest quality staff, what are those specific things that we're doing to be able to accomplish that goal for the next 12 months to meet the desired outcome in 3 to 5 years? Building the awareness and capacity to improve the health and well-being for our school district community. You can see that, again, here's an example of what's the rationale. Students and staff need a safe and secure learning environment or workplace where they can feel a sense of belonging and where they are respected, engaged, and proud to be part of the Wayzata school community. Healthy minds plus healthy bodies equal healthy learners. Learn and improve from community engagement and strategic partnerships. Now there's a long rationale that is attached to it, recognizing that the school district comprises approximately 75,000 residents. Of those, about 13,500 are enrolled in early learning through grade 12 and transition. So earlier you saw some enrollment projections where we continue to move forward. That 13,500 continues to grow, and that's including early childhood all the way through transition. Again, ensuring the effective and efficient use of district resources. Earlier this evening, you got a budget update with some budget parameters from Dee Dee Caring and her team to be able to talk about what should we be thinking about as we move forward. We all know coming out of COVID, every system in the state was rattled financially by some of the expectations and costs that we all incurred. So how do we make sure that we are doing the best job we can with our taxpayer-funded dollars to ensure the best quality experience for each and every one of our kids? And again, the aligning internal district processes and procedures to improve communication, decision-making, accountability, collaboration, resulting in operational excellence. I'd like to be able to go back and when Dr. Anderson talked about this being the business model, what are we doing internally to make the system better? Because there's always, there's a phrase I'll use, there's always a problem of practice. There's always something we can get better at. And to say that we have arrived or, boy, we are the best, there's a lot of things that we can say we're the best at, or we are one of the best, or we can compete with pretty much anybody nationally. Wayzata as a school district has a lot to be proud of. And if you ever stop and rest on your laurels, you have to be careful because you can quickly become irrelevant. You can also, there's a book some of you have chatted with about it. It's called Good to Great. What are the things that good businesses did? What did some of the businesses outlined in that book do to become great businesses? But there's also a follow-up book called How the Mighty Fall. And How the Mighty Fall actually talks about some of those great businesses and the failures that they experienced. One of them is success born of hubris. So in our organization, when we talk about putting a premium on continuous improvement, that means we create the conditions for continuous improvement and success and expectations. We create the urgency. Because if we don't create our own urgency, we can always fall back upon, oh, we're really great. And we are, and we can get better. And if we don't keep pushing and pushing to get a little bit better every year, that's where we can fall backwards. So, examples of planned operational goals. Literacy. You heard again, going back to Dana Miller and her presentation earlier this evening about the READ Act updates. There's a lot of work that we're doing in literacy across the district. You've heard us talk about the building instructional leadership teams. That you can expect to see as a planned district operational goal. Reducing disparities in academic outcomes. You'll hear me use the phrase disparities versus gaps. I do that on purpose and with very strong intentionality because you'll always have a gap. If somebody's at the 99th percentile, if somebody's at the 90th percentile, you have a gap. What we describe is what are the disparities? Who is not meeting the expectations, the minimum level of expectations that as a district we hold to ourselves to meet. Building a continuum of mental health resources, creating a strategic community engagement and partnership plan, and facilities reviews. Those are examples. That is not all encompassing. I'm just highlighting a couple that you can expect to see as we begin moving forward and what will be coming in the coming months in these next iterations of the operational plan. What you haven't seen is an actual documentation of anything yet. That's forthcoming. We wanted to talk about next steps. So here we are in January, really trying to provide that initial overview. Next month at our work session, we want to be able to bring DOP, the iteration number 1. And as part of that, because I highlighted as an example, the BUILT team, I've asked some of our principals to come and join us and talk about the work that they're doing with BUILT. BUILT was really implemented across the entire system last year. We had only one building previously doing building instructional leadership teams at their site. There was a wide variety of what leadership teams looked like. And what we said is we need to systematize this and we need to be able to bring about greater clarity. So some of our principals will be coming and joining us and talking about the big shifts that they have made and what are they seeing as really positive changes with the BUILT. March, we'll bring another updated draft to you. And it's going to be continuous refinement, but then we'll talk about and bring the discussion forth on mental health resources update and some of the work that's happening within the system. April, we'll hopefully have another draft for you with the desired final board approval in May. The reason that we want that annually in May is that leads us into our summer work. So as a district, we can have finality and say to our principals at our Leadership Institute in June, here is our district operational plan. Here are the things that we are doing within the system over the next 12 months to be able to meet our strategic directions. So the future work, the board will receive regular updates on those DOP goals based on the board-approved strategic directions. When you hear us present, you'll hear the connection. What are we presenting on and what is it tied to directly of those 7 strategic directions? We need to be able to make sure they're aligned. The annual dates, so when you think about that January to April, that's when the drafts are being developed and made. April and May, hopefully always getting that approval. And then September through June, the regular updates at work sessions on the DOP goals by the superintendent and or SLT members. So as we think about this shift, I know that there's been a lot of talk about what does the superintendent's evaluation process look like? Well, quarterly updates. Well, truthfully, we should be giving you, through this process, almost monthly updates on the work that we're doing within the system. So our desire is to be able to be really transparent with that work and really forward moving with a lot of it to say, how are we improving the system as a whole? So there's a lot of work that will go into it. There's a lot of work that has yet to happen in our strategy leadership team because this is the first time we've done it as SLT. We'll continue to refine it. And in year 1, the product will look probably a little bit different than it will in year 2, as it will look a little bit different in year 3. Every year we'll continue to refine that operational plan. But as we talk about that work and as we tie that into so much of the board development that we've done, and I think back to our last board development session where the individual who's working with us, our consultant, said, this is priority work, being able to get this operational plan done. Because as a board, it gives you the direction that you need to be able to say, how are you measuring us on the work that we're trying to accomplish day to day? And I would also tie in, I think it was really important. In those meetings, I think the board was really direct in saying on a scale of 1 to 10, your desire was to be a 7 in policy governance. And because 10 just means, and we don't want that, the community doesn't want that, that's rubber stamping. A 1 is you're in the weeds and you're basically running the management. Well, then that's where SLT and Chase and I, we wouldn't need to be here. And we recognize our role is to run the day-to-day. The board's role is to be able to say, how are we doing the high-level work and holding that accountability? A 7, when we think about our district committees, that's when we get on the dance floor a little bit together and there's conversations that are happening in those meetings a little bit more into the weeds than what you might have on your regular day-to-day experiences. So there's a lot there, and we wanted to be able to provide a high-level flyover. I also recognize we're now at this time sitting 40 plus minutes over our scheduled end time, and I thank you all for your attentiveness as we go through a lot of this work, but I also wanted to open it up for questions and or Dr. Anderson, if you've got any final comments or thoughts.
I do just have one quick thing to add. So Nate, thanks for that overview. In some of our recent SLT meetings, we've been working through the process with each one of our strategic directions, trying to identify themes. And thanks to Solveig Herode, she was very helpful in facilitating some recent meetings to help harvest ideas from the team in regard to, you noticed a lot of frameworks on there without a lot of narrative in them yet. So we're developing those themes and the focus areas are those priorities. So that'll be ongoing work here in the coming weeks, couple of months maybe, to try to bring that higher level of detail to that plan. So with that, Mr. Chair, we'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you both. I appreciate this. Any questions, comments from colleagues? No one? Okay, Heidi, yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, for all the work that's being done. And second of all, I wanted to, again, bring out this difference between qualitative and quantitative data. And a lot of times when we think about evidence-based and that kind of decision-making, individuals may only think of quantitative data as driving it. Qualitative data is equally important, equally analyzable, and equally important. So thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Heidi. I just wanted to ask Nate a question. So the district operations plan is, does it, I've seen this for the first time, so I really have to go back and look at it again and again and again and internalize it. But does it cover all the 7 strategic directions as of now, or are we do that additionally in each iteration?
each iteration will continue to add to it. So when we bring you the first draft next month, it might not have everything on it yet. And there's going to be pieces we want to be able to highlight with you and be able to address. But we shouldn't be adding goals onto this as our district priority work unless it's helping us meet the outcomes of those 7 strategic directions.
And so the next review, I believe, would be in 2027 of the strategic roadmap. And then, if and when things change, then we'll have to look at another district operations plan. But until then, these 7 strategic directions are the ones we are focusing on.
Correct. They will guide our work annually.
Okay. Thank you.
I would just say maybe too, in addition to that, it's kind of a living document, so to speak.
Yeah.
So can that continuous improvement, continuous focus, and not necessarily tinkering around the edges, so to speak, but continuous review of it.
Good. Thank you. Any other comment, questions? All right. It's been a long evening. Thank you all for your patience. And as Dr. Klansberg said, we ran 40 minutes over, but I think we got a lot done. So there are no board reports today. And so that completes our agenda for this evening. It is now 6:45, and the Wayzata Public Schools Board of Education work session for January 22, 2024 is adjourned.